Hello. Welcome to my channel. You'll experience all the unpleasantness that comes with me. Right. So we're up to Act 2, the existential dilemma, right? It seems that the title of this book is very triggering to some, right? And it's very cute. It's very cute, because these anti-Semitic pigs, these Nazis that come on my channel and somehow think that their opinion is going to make a difference, right? Right? And they think that somehow these Nazis that come on my channel, they think that somehow their opinion on who the real Jew is and who's indigenous to Israel is going to make a difference to whether the Jews exist in Israel or not. It's hilarious, as if they think that them watching some Nazi channels is going to somehow about how the Jews are not indigenous to Israel and how the Arabs, who they call the Palestinians, right, have DNA, which is Levantine. Some of them have DNA, which is Canaanite and Levantine, that somehow that's going to change the fact that they don't come from here, right? It's very, DNA is a very complicated thing, and Judaism is not even about DNA. We don't really care for genetics, right? We're not Nazis. Genetics is irrelevant to the conversation of being a Jew, right? And it just happens to be that, because Judaism is the first religion that, before Islam and Christianity. So it just happens to be that, obviously, if the Jews were here, it's common sense that if Jewish people who are of the culture of the Jews who lived in Israel before Islam and before Christianity, the common sense would say that, hey, those Jews that come from this region were there before you. So even if you have DNA that comes from here, it means that you came with conquest, or you kidnapped Jews, or you forcibly converted Jews, or if you're not of the culture of the Jewish people and the Jewish nation and you are a Muslim. Islam started in Saudi Arabia, so there is no connection spiritually, physically, historically of you to being connected to Israel in any way, regardless of whether you might have some Canaanite DNA, because being Jewish has nothing to do with genetics, right? It has to do with partly, the genetic part is actually a treat for the Jewish people, because genetically, Ashkenazi Jews have Semitic blood, and they have blood which is connecting us to the land of Israel, Levantine blood, right? So there's a lot of questions that can be had regarding the DNA and the genetics of why it's relevant to the conversation at all. But a lot of these people who are anti-Semitic and hate Jews, they think that by sending me videos of Nazi channels that are there to debunk the fact that Jews are from here and that, the Arabs are somehow indigenous to Israel, right? When literally they come from Arabia, because they're Arabs. And if they have Jewish DNA, it's because, there were Jews living in the Middle East, and a lot of the Jewish people, they were forcibly converted to Islam, and their daughters were kidnapped and taken into forced marriages with these Muslim jihadis. And so if Arabs have Jewish DNA, it's because they literally raped women. It's a demonstration of their rape culture. And let's not forget that even there's a lot of Christians and Christian Arabs in the Arab world that also have DNA that comes from the Levant, where we live here in this area. So, they're the ones that are indigenous to Israel? And let's not even forget to take in account the fact that, Jewish people before, when they were living in the time of the First and Second Temple, the Jewish people were literally proselytizing, right? And Abraham's whole household, right? Before he even, when he became a Jew, right? And he was circumcised, as the tale goes in the Bible, he had his whole entire household circumcised with him, and he had them all become Jewish. And his household were his servants. They were of different ethnicities, and they all became Jewish, right? And so there already you have people with genetics that are already being mixed into the ancient Israelites. And then you have in the Bible, you also have Egyptians that came out with the Jews out of Egypt. They came with the Israelites. They came with the 12 tribes, and they joined the 12 tribes, and they married into the 12 tribes, and they were converted into Judaism. And then we have the Egyptian DNA, right? Because they are coming into the tribe, and they are joining the tribe, so they bring in with them their DNA. And then you have the Jews come to the land of Israel, and then they're dealing with the Canaanites, and then they marry into the Canaanites, right? And a lot of Canaanites convert to Judaism. And what happened here? So, like, the whole entire idea of somehow that because some Arabs have DNA that happen to be Jewish makes them somehow indigenous and they deserve to live here, and the Jewish people are somehow illegitimate to Israel. It's bizarre because, also, basically you're saying that these people that want to delegitimize Jewish people and their connection to Israel, they're saying basically that Jewish people who have Canaanite DNA are less indigenous than those Palestinians who have also Canaanite DNA. Somehow the Arabs belong in Israel over the Jews, because the DNA is similar, so somehow the Arabs deserve to live here and kick the Jews out because the Arabs somehow are the real Jew. Like, the whole thing is perverted. So the argument that I brought up with this moron that came on my channel is that Jews are all converts. We are all converted since the days of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They took wives. Their wives were taken from the Moabites. They were taken from Mesopotamia. They were taken from all different places. King Solomon, all his wives, he had 1,000 wives, and they were all from the different countries, and they had children, I'm sure, and they were part of the Jewish nation. King Solomon's children were of mixed ethnicity. Moses married a black woman who was not even, she became converted to Judaism, and it's not about genetics. That's what people don't get. Do you know what I mean? Even though genetics is the cherry on top, and the genetics is the cherry on top, it just happens to be that after 1,000 years, 2,000 years of exile, the Jewish people in Europe still happen to have connection to the Middle East when literally we weren't there for 2,000 years. What does that mean? It has to mean something, right? Hi, Hattie. Same thing they always do. Some of them are just brave enough to admit their identity. They bring up the DNA issue on every channel, insisting that you are a Khazar. The Khazars, right? Even though not even 1% of your genes belong to Central Asia, right? They have absurd fantasies like muds suddenly turning into humans, or Khazars evolving into Poles. None of this has any basis in reality. In Tabari, his history book, it is written that Qutayba ibn Muslims enslaved millions of Turks and Iranians as concubines, and they called them, all of them Mawali, giving non-Arab Muslims second-class freedoms. Judaism opened its doors to Eastern Europeans who converted and treated them with honor. Wouldn't that demonstrate the superiority of Judaism? Turks, British, Arabs, Chinese. There are Jews who have married and continued their lineage in many different ethnic groups. Did the mixing of their blood harm Jewish culture, or did it strengthen it? The second one is strengthening it. Yeah, this is a clear proof of the strength of Jewish culture. The bird sounds coming from the background are really pleasant. Yeah, the sun is going down. I don't know if you can see, but I have to show you before. I want to show you outside my window how beautiful it is. Well, you can just, you can't really see the. You can't see what I see. Like, I see a beautiful sunset, and it's really beautiful. Only if I bring it from here, you'll be able to see from my view. I don't know if you can see. Never mind. It's just not going to do any good. Right? So, there are many Jews who converted to Judaism throughout the centuries. Not many, but you have. And the Jews were a proselytizing nation before we were exiled. So that's something that these people don't get. You know what I mean? And the fact that they're so obsessed with genes and genetics to kind of actually prove who's from here, it discredits the Jewish culture. Like, it's trying to, it means they don't understand the Jewish culture, what it's about, right? For the fact that my great aunt was a convert, she converted to Judaism. She had no Jewish DNA, right? Zero Canaanite DNA. She was Russian, right? And there are many Jewish people who converted to Judaism and they don't have Jewish DNA, but when they marry into the nation, they marry into the tribe, and of course you become part of the ethnicity after marrying into the tribe. That's how, I guess, an ethnicity is made, right? So that is something that it was like really like irritating me, you know, like this guy was like commenting on my channel. Maybe I can show you the comments, right, so you can understand what's going on here, right? So he was commenting on one of the earlier videos here. Which video was it? Maybe I could just go to manage the videos, and I don't know why it bothers me, you know, like, as if this person has any, like, as if this person has any influence on what can happen, do you know what I mean? What's gonna happen in the future, right? Right? So this person here, yeah, a shame that is mostly lies. Zion fantasy based on debunked biblical myths. The ancient Hebrews were Highland Canaanites who, through the subsequent years, became ancestral to modern Jews. In part, Ashkenazi Jews are 50% Semitic by DNA, as turns out. I think this guy is wrong. Ashkenazi Jews are 30% Semitic, not more, right? As turns out, modern Palestinians are also descended from Canaanites, plus a few other ancient peoples who remained in the land throughout. That's not true, because the Arabs of today, if you ask any of them their names, their last names, a lot of their names will say from where they come from. Like, they have certain last names which say, oh, the Egyptian, right? So you know they come from Egypt. And if they lived in Israel, it's only because they came with conquests, right? These Arabs came and conquered the land. They were occupiers, and they lived in Israel until now, but they're still the occupiers, right? Then he gives me some sources, right, for Canaanite DNA. I checked it out, you know, and regardless of DNA, right, it doesn't make the Jewish people any less indigenous to this land, because we have a biblical promise. It's a religious right, and the physical DNA is a cherry on top, and the genetics in general, it's completely irrelevant to the conversation, right? It's completely irrelevant to the conversation, because we're not Nazi genetic supremacists. Like, that is not something that we focus on. Like, we accept converts, and Jews have always been converts. I keep repeating the same thing, right? So this guy says 7,000 shekels to you. So I wrote, do you need my account info for the transfer? That would be really helpful. Thank you. So I don't know why this guy hasn't given me my money yet. That is something that I'm waiting for. Even a Palestinian carries more Jewish genes than the Goths, just like Yemenis. Yet if you show respect to such converts. In response to the Canaanites who harbor hostility towards you with the tooth for tooth, eye for an eye philosophy, it demonstrates the perfection of your moral system. Yeah. So I think that proves, right? It proves that the genetics means nothing. You know what I mean? Like, that's what people don't get. The existentialist dilemma, right? The Jews, God, and divine pragmatism. Time span from Jesus to Ben Gurion. So now we're going to start part 2, from Jesus to Ben Gurion. Jewish history goes on to talk about what we're going to be talking about, right? Where we're up to. And back to the whole idea of, Jews being converts, Jews not being indigenous to the land. Go look at Rabbi Akiva, the greatest of the sages, right? Written in the Talmud, written in the Tanakh. The prophets, some of them, their mothers were not even, they were converts to the Jews. And so the entire conversation is irrelevant. Do you know what I mean? Would allow generalizations about an entire population or establish correlations. He knows this, and to manipulate you, he asks Grok to list items that could support the opposing view, covering to 5-10%. Individual examples do not provide data that would allow generalizations about an entire population, right? These are Christian tactics they use to pressure you into converting and to break your defenses. So you're basically saying that they will bring evidence that the Arabs are genetically, they'll bring some studies that say, that they have Jewish DNA and therefore they are indigenous to the land, and they will say all the Arabs that live here have this DNA and they're all indigenous to the land, when literally their DNA is because they rape women. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many reasons why an Arab would have some Jewish DNA. There are so many reasons. Ice rain here now. You need coffee. Very nice. Ice rain, right? So now we're up to all of this. It's going to talk about all of this in the next section, part 2. How the Arab conquests, the Roman Republic overthrown, and Octavianus Augustus becomes emperor of Rome. 1st century AD, dominated by reigns of Augustus, Nero, Vespasian, and Titus. The 2nd century by Trajan, Hadrian, and the Antonines. Persecution of Christians in full bloom. Parthians contain Roman expansion to the east. Then it goes on to more Jewish world history, then the Jewish history on the other side, right? First, they challenged the Roman world, 100 BC to 200 AD. 1st century BC opens with Hasmoneans as rulers of Judea and ends with the Romans as its conquerors. Hillel gives Mishnah its scientific foundation. Hillel gives Mishnah its scientific foundations. Jesus is crucified. Jews revolt against Rome and are crushed. Sadducees, Judaism dies in embers of gutted Jerusalem. Ben Zakkai founds his academy for diaspora in Judaism, and Gamliel becomes the St. Paul of the new doctrine. Revolt of Bar Kokhba and the beginning of flight of Jews to Parthia. Judah Hanasi codifies the Mishnah. There's a lot going on here. It talks about the persecutions of the Christians in full bloom. Parthians contain Roman expansion to the east, all in this time. Right? So, let's get down to it. It's just talking about what we're going to be talking about, I guess. It goes on to talk about it even goes back down to the Tsars of Russia and what happened to the Jews there. So this should be very informative, my friends, and it's very exciting. The rise and the fall of the Talmud, right? So let's not forget, most Jewish houses have an entire set of what we know as the Talmud, but there was a huge amount of Talmud that was erased from Jewish history because the Christians got rid of it, right? No porno talk about Jibus. Moshe was born in Egypt. Moshe, an Egyptian name. Moshe is an Egyptian name because they drew him from the water, right? These are fallacious arguments they used to manipulate you. Even the Jewish DNA in Yemeni Arabs is entirely the result of forced unions, manifestation of mass perversion. Exactly. We are not a race or skin color DNA test, etc. Some of the greatest rabbis, Jews, were converts. that was my argument that I was telling this guy, right? If you rewind my video, this live, I demonstrate the guy how he's putting all this stuff that the Arabs, the Palestinians are the real Jews, right? And somehow they were there before us because they have Canaanite DNA. Meanwhile, it's like the idea of DNA is irrelevant in Judaism because Jews were proselytizing. Before we were exiled, we were proselytizing. And even today, we accept converts. Converts are accepted when they really want it into Judaism. And so, like I said, my great aunt, may she rest in peace, her name was Tasia, she converted to Judaism, Orthodox conversion. And she's buried in the Jewish cemetery next to my great uncle, right? So, and a lot of, like, King David's lineage, right? His I'm not sure his grandmother or his mother was a Moabite, right? Being connected to the land of Israel has nothing to do with DNA or genetics, even though it's partly true that the Jewish people we do have DNA that connects us to this area. We do have, Ashkenazi Jews have it. Like, I would like to do a DNA test because I got my father's DNA test. My father took a DNA test and I have it. I have my father's DNA test. But let's see if I can. Other albums. Let's go see if I can get. Right? I don't understand WhatsApp images. I wonder if I can find it. I don't know if I can find my father's genetics, his DNA, where we got the paper because he got his DNA examined and he's 99%, he's 99.6% Ashkenazi, Jewish, Belarusian, Ukrainian, and like 0.1% Japanese, something like that. So I'm looking for it, but I should be here somewhere. Here, I think it is. Okay, here it is. My father's DNA, right, is... Okay, I should screenshot this. Found it. Okay, so his summary is Roman Italy. Okay, my father's DNA goes like this. We're not a race or a skin color. Rabbi Akiva considered Bar Kokhba Mashiach an error. Yeah, the thing is that Mashiach can... It's a very controversial topic because a lot of rabbis believe that you're supposed to choose your rabbi to be your Mashiach in this generation. You're supposed to point someone out. It's actually a mitzvah, right? Yeah, so let me tell you. A DNA test can't showcase a person's religion. Exactly. Right, so, and even then, it says where they come from, but the Arabs don't come from here, but they come from Arabia, but a lot of them have Levantine DNA. Why is that? It's because a lot of them, they had Jews among them, and they would forcibly convert them to Islam, and they would intermarry with them, or they would kidnap the children off the street, and they would have babies with those Jewish kids, right? And they would make them force them to be Muslim. So then, now they have the Jewish DNA because they kidnapped those people. They kidnapped those poor kids off the street. And this is something that I heard personally from Mizrahi people who lived in the Middle Eastern regions, from Yemen, right? One lady told me that her grandmother, a lot of them had to get married very young to other Jewish people because if they weren't married, the Arabs would force them to give their kids, or they would kill them, force them to give their kids to Muslims. So, horror stories coming out of there. So, if they have Jewish DNA, it's because they were raped and they were kidnapped, right? So, my father's DNA is 99.6% European, Ashkenazi Jewish, Belarusian Jews, Eastern Polish, and Western Ukrainian Jews, plus one region, right? Trace ancestry. We detected traces of the following populations in your DNA. Read more about trace ancestry in the facts, right? So you have Japanese, 0.2% Japanese, and then 0.2% unassigned. So summary is Roman Italy, 41% of the DNA, it says, is 41.4% of my father's DNA is Roman Italian, 20 BC AD to 600 AD, it says. Roman Levantine DNA is from BC 50 AD to BC 50 700 AD 700, BC 50 AD 700 to AD 700, and it's 33% of his DNA. Slavic, he has 9.2%, and it says like the times that he might have been in those regions. Slavic DNA is 9.2%. Roman North African is 8.6%. Germanic DNA is 6.4%, and Sinitic is 1.4%. What is Sinitic? Sinitic is Let's go see. I don't know what that is. Sinitic. Relating to denoting a division of Sino-Tibetan language family that includes many forms of spoken Chinese. Chinese? It could be that there was, in Asia, right, there were Jewish communities in Asia, and it could be someone was raped or whatever. Who knows, you know? Sinitic DNA. So the Sinitic DNA is from 1230 BC to 200 AD. It refers to genetic makeup of people speaking Sinitic language, such as Chinese. Right. So we have a little bit of Chinese. That means that if my father has a little bit of Chinese and Japanese DNA, it means that, you know, if I would get a test, I have 50% of my father's DNA and 50% of my mother's DNA. So I would like to do a DNA test to check for myself what my DNA is, and then I would know for sure. Both sides of my family, and then all my siblings, because we come from the same parents, we would know what our DNA is. Just one of us have to do a test, and we all know where we come from, which is really cool, right? We're all earthlings. Hashem made all of us. Exactly. Are these people your brothers, or are the Arabs currently residing in Yemen? The Houthis, right? Could there be a connection with the Crimeans, Bashkirs, and Kazakhs living in Russia? Maybe the Chinese gene came to you through Central Asians. Right. So the thing is that the guy even got it wrong. The guy who commented on my channel, he got it wrong, because he says Ashkenazis have 50% Semitic DNA. That's not true. We have, like, my father has less than that, you know. And the fact that, you know, my father has 30% of his genetics still intact from 2,000 years ago, right? Tracing back to Israel through this whole exile and surviving through all that, it's a miracle. It's miraculous, my friends. Literally miraculous. It says here, you know, like, Roman Levant, right, 33%, right? That's the Ashkenazi Jewish DNA, right? So, you carry Tatar genes. OU is trying to sue 23andMe nonsense, telling people that they have Jewish DNA. Who's OU? Who's OU? When people come into show claiming they are Jews from some nonsense DNA test. I mean, if they want to be Jewish, they can convert. You know what I mean? If they really want to be Jewish, they can convert. I don't understand why they... Like in the old days, if you walk around claiming you're Jewish, it's not a good look. You would get killed for that. Nobody likes the Jews. But now somehow everybody wants to be Jewish, you know? Ethiopian Jews, Asian, Russia, Middle East Jews from all races, colors, and cultures. Exactly. you know, there are people who are converts into Judaism and they have zero Levantine DNA. Does that mean that they're not part of Jewish culture and that they are not indigenous to Israel? No. Our indigenousness is spiritual and cultural. And the genetics it's the cherry on top, right? Moshe is not from Europe or Poland. Orthodox Union, Litvak, non-Hasidim, non-Hasidus. Moshe was Jewish. He was part of the Israelites, right? But you have to understand that the ancient Israelites from Abraham, his household all converted to Jews. And they married into his kids, right? Who do you think his sons married? They had servants, and they married these people, and that's what made the 12 tribes, right? And their children, and their families, and everything, you know? It wasn't like... It's not like Jewish people are completely inbred, you know what I mean? They want to learn Kabbalah, yet don't know Chumash. It's hilarious, right? What's this?
But then we're gonna work. There's always a lot of work in the village.
I don't know what this is. Bashkirs are considered more beautiful than Russians. The reason the mix, there is another Eastern European woman carrying Central Asian genes. Sephora was black, yeah. In video, the person next to the woman is her brother. Her brother? Wow, she has a young brother. Okay, rise of the Talmud, right? So then it goes to talk about the challenge, time, and response, right? So the challenge was the expanding society of the Greco-Roman world. The time was 200 BC to 280. The Tanas and the Mishnah. The response was creating the Tanas and the Mishnah. The second challenge was the interim society of the Parthian Sassanid world, 200 to 500. And the response to that was the Amoras and the Gemara. They created that, right? Then there was the fusion of Mishnah and Gemara into the Talmud, right? And then it goes on to talk about the Maharal's time and all that. Program note, the road to the Mishnah, right? So this is going to be interesting because even though I grew up in the tradition, right, and I grew up in a very ultra-Orthodox family, right, very ultra-Orthodox community, ultra-Orthodox family, literally, like, in the most fanatical sense, I still am ignorant on a lot of the scriptures, right, and the Jewish law, even though I lived it, right? Rabbi Gershon, first Ashkenazi Jews, 1000 CE in Rhineland, white Jews, a new group. Right, so the thing is that I tried to find a book written by Marcus Lehman about the Jews living in the story of the time, which I used to read, and I can't find it for free. I would have to buy the book, and... Second. My eyes hurting. Let me put some eye drops in my eye. Turn on this. Turn on the radio. Listen to the news. We're gonna win and we're not gonna lose. When we're up, we're up. When we're down, we're down. Second. Yeah. 1 second. That's what made. You're saying that Asian genes as natural beauty to all of them. Even today, large part of Ukraine is populated with Crimean settlers, and this kind of mixes that make Ukrainians more beautiful. Not the Aryan fanaticism claimed by Europeans. You gave this example deliberately because Christian preachers label you as mixed race while defining themselves as northern whites, like American Christians labeled us as barbarians. The thing is that, like, the Chinese people, for example, the Chinese people, they all look the same, right? They all look Asian, and, you know, but there's enough of them that they don't really, like, need to worry about the genetic diseases, because one person from one city can go to someone from the other city, and it won't be, like, so much like inbreeding, right? Oh, very... Okay. The road to the Mishnah. Has everything in the first acts actually taken place according to some divine plan? Or have the Jews been the victims of a collective delusion? Right, that's what the guy who commented on my channel accused me of. He accused me of having delusions. Right? He said I'm delusional. Do they have a blueprint showing them how to convert their accidental Babylonian exile to ethnic death into a deliberate diaspora for ideological survival? If so, have they been properly prepared for their great but lonely odyssey in a world diaspora? Is this exile or diaspora or a curse or a blessing? That's so interesting. Hold on. Have the Jews been doomed to extinction, or have they been exiled to freedom? Listen, you know, it's wild, because literally my father's DNA says that he has 40% Roman. It's basically Roman Italian, right? It's basically Roman Italian DNA, right? So the Ashkenazi Jews are very closely genetically to the they're very linked closely to the Roman Italian DNA, right? That's why I say a lot of Ashkenazi Jews are Italian, right? 40% of the DNA is Italian. So my DNA, it could be said that I'm Italian. Not really, but I'm Jewish, of course. But that's why a lot of if you see it, the Ashkenazi Jews, they can have an Italian nose, which isn't necessarily like upturned, it's more hook, right? They have like Italian features, like darker hair, darker eyes, right? Because we discussed that the ancient Greeks, who were the Cretans, yesterday we discussed this, that they had dark hair and dark eyes, right? And so it's a very interesting discussion. So it's basically Roman Italian, Roman Levant, even though it's Russian also DNA, right? Not Russian, it's Ashkenazi Jewish, and this is for the Belarusian Jews and Eastern Polish and Western Ukrainian Jews. Jews in Europe, this is their DNA, right? It's Slavic, Roman North African, Germanic, and Semitic, which is, as we discussed, is Asian. So it's fascinating, my friends. It's just, for me, it's fascinating, right? So most Jewish women have Milan Italian DNA. Yeah, my rabbi's wife from Milan. Exactly. No, they're not literally Italian, but we have that DNA, right? Being Italian actually points to other genes connected to the Levant. Phoenicians, Greeks, Egyptians, aren't they all Mediterranean, right? You share a common gene pool. It's very interesting. My grandparents, Litvak, from Lithuania. Jews don't look like Slavic. They look Scandinavian. How do the Scandinavians look? Let's see. Scandinavian refers to the country of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Interesting. Okay, so back to here, right? If there is a Jewish manifest destiny in which Act 1 was the training program for survival in exile, then Act 2 must transpire in an ever-expanding diaspora, where the Jews will be strewn among the dominant civilizations of the world to help achieve their mission. We saw their first act training program provide them with the will to survive as Jews. We shall see the second act diaspora provide them with a setting for their indestructibility. We saw the first act proceed like an ancient Greek predestination drama, with God as the author. We shall see the second act proceed like a modern French existentialist drama, with the Jew himself as the author. Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist, conceives of each human being as eventually becoming the prisoner of the choices he is forced to make throughout life. Each time we make a choice, says Sartre, it shapes, limits, and influences the number and direction of our future choices, until finally we checkmate ourselves into an inescapable cubicle of thought and action. We condemn ourselves to live in a world hewn by the pattern of our past choices. The exiled Jews, standing in the lobby of history in the fateful first century A.D., waiting for the second act curtain, are faced with just such an existentialist choice. They must either accept or reject the notion that they have a manifest destiny, a covenant to fulfill. They must either deny the meaning of their past or reaffirm it. On the one hand, the diaspora Jews can say that this talk of a predestination drama is a lot of nonsense. What has happened is only an interesting constellation of accidental and personal events, which some people have distorted out of all proportions to reality. We were defeated in war. They could say we lost our land, we were exiled, and now it's our turn to disappear. Just as under similar circumstances, the Sumerians, the Hittites, and Babylonians, the Assyrians, and Persians, yes, even the Jews in the kingdom of Israel disappeared. On the other hand, they can say that their ancestors could not have been pursuing a mere illusion for 2,000 years. They could say that if we are God's chosen people, as our forefathers affirmed, if we have been placed in an exile to accomplish a divine mission as our prophets predicted, and since we did receive the Torah, then we must survive to fulfill our covenant with God. There is one more argument in favor of not rejecting the past, but reaffirming it. Even if one were to assume that the idea of a special Jewish mission has been an illusion, have not the Jews nevertheless achieved enduring values in the pursuit of that illusion? Have they not given the world the concept of monotheism, an outline for a democratic governance of man, a prophetic view of justice? What other people, what other nation, what other civilization could boast of such a string of accomplishments? The Jews have seen the hanging gardens of Babylon tumble, beheld the palaces of the Assyrians crumble, witnessed the pyramids of the Egyptians vanish into sand. The mighty Greeks had been harnessed to the chariot of Rome. Great empires had been tossed into the junkyard. Of past history, and pagan gods have been abandoned one by one. But the God of the Jews, the prophets of the Jews, the ideas of the Jews had prevailed. They exchanged a winning team for why exchange a winning team for a losing one? The Jews have to make their existentialist choice. History tells us they chose not to deny their past, but to reaffirm it. The Jewish Rubicon has now been crossed. Rubicon. Let's see what the Rubicon. Rubicon. It's a river that Julius Caesar crossed in 49 BC. So the Jewish river, so to speak, right? It's a metaphor. The Jewish Rubicon has now been crossed. The Jews became the prisoners of that choice, whereas in the past, unconscious impulses may have motivated Jewish destiny. It is no longer so. In the second act, it is conscious, deliberate, pragmatic actions that shape Jewish history. In the second act, it is conscious, deliberate, pragmatic actions that shape Jewish history. Not God, but the Jew himself is at the helm of his destiny. Not God, but the Jew himself writes his survival script. Before we examine the nature of our second act, survival script, let us first ask why God did not continue to write it. Had he abandoned his chosen people and handed the scepter of chosenness to the Christians, as that new sect claimed? Or was there another explanation for this seeming divine oversight? Perhaps it was not God who had abandoned the Jews, but the Jews who unwittingly had shut God out of their scheme of things. It was an unforeseen consequence of a necessary course of action. With the final canonization of the Old Testament, the Jews had stated, in effect, that God had said all there was to say. Thus, by closing Scripture, they had made further revelation impossible. This decision to close Scripture had not been arbitrary, but had been forced on them by the Christians. The Christian claimed that their Gospels were divine postscripts that ought to be made part of the Jewish Testament. Alarmed. So it was because the Christians basically said that the Jews need to take on the New Testament and make it one of our holy books. That's why the Jews said, okay, this is it. But I don't know if that's the actual real reason. It could be one of the contributing factors, right? So the Christians claimed that their Gospels were divine postscripts that ought to be made part of the Jewish Testament. Alarmed the Jews. Other future sects might also give rise to messiahs whose followers might press for the inclusion of their Gospels as supplementary chapters of the Holy Book. Closing the Torah to all further additions seemed to be the best solution against polluting it with false doctrine. Thus, by the end of the first act, the canonization of the Jewish Testament had been final and irrevocable. This decision by the Jews to close Scripture placed the Christians in a quandary at first, but then they hit on a neat Jewish solution. They themselves went into the revealed text business, claiming that Jewish Holy Scripture was the Old Testament and that theirs was the New Testament. Exactly. It was a play of words. So now they're connecting it to Judaism, right? By saying that it's just an extension to them, but we don't care for their book at all, right? Where are we? My grandparents lit back, Scandinavian hair, blue eyes, no blue hair. Roman Levant, Aegean, Greek islands, Italy from Moroccan to Lebanon and Syria. You carry Jews from every part of the Mediterranean spectrum. This means you are Mediterranean. Your other connection with Israel. The Carthaginians both pirated along all the Mediterranean and European coasts and left their offsprings everywhere. No Italy before 1800s. We have no king but Caesar. John 19:15. No Germany before 1800s either. John 5:7-8. Father, Son, Ghost is an admitted insertion by church fathers to back up their new Trinity pagan idolatry. Martin Luther refused to add one John Trinity in his German Bible. Luther wanted the entire book of James removed. Luther and Calvin had people burned alive, including children. Yeah. Dylan has a song about Israel called Neighborhood Bully. It's so prophetic and clever. Exactly. It talks about how the Jewish people are... I made a video on that. It talks about how we Jewish people stand alone and we are considered the neighborhood bully and everybody wants us dead, and they call us the neighborhood bully. Meanwhile, we're just trying to survive, right? Perhaps it was not God who had abandoned the Jews, but the Jews who unwittingly had... Yeah, Bob Dylan, Zimmerman. Dylan also had a song called Cross the Rubicon about Caesar. Closing the Torah to all further additions seemed to be the best solution against polluting. Right. One of Dylan's best songs about Rome is When I Paint My Masterpiece. Okay. Crowd called Dylan Judas at his concert, insult the Jew as usual. He couldn't escape, Bob Dylan, even though he converted to Christianity. I'm telling you, that's why it's a perfect example of why Jews should never convert to any religion, because we will never, even those Jews who are the token Jew, right, that are Christian, they still will get abused, if not by regular Christians that like Jews, they will get abused by other Christians, right, who hate Jews. Is there Christian DNA or Islam DNA? So absurd. Because Christianity is not a... It's not a ethnicity, right? Dylan would not appreciate your picture of Luther. Dylan came to see Chabad Lodge Rebbe. Rebbe made him come into office? Really? I heard that Bob Dylan came to the Farbrengen and the Rebbe ignored him. That's what I heard. Dylan wanted the Rebbe to him in his limo. Rebbe made him get out and walk in. Chutzpah. Chutzpah Bob Dylan, right? Are black Americans more Christian or are black Africans more Muslim? Jew is a bloodline, not a religion. It's both. It's both. It just happens to be, even though... So, back to the thought of my father being, having 40% of his blood Roman Italian. I wonder how that came to be, right? Why Ashkenazi Jews... Jews have Roman, Italian blood, 40%. Genetic studies suggest that Ashkenazi Jews have a significant genetic connection to Southern European populations, specifically ancient Italian and Greek groups, which accounts for a substantial portion of their ancestry, potentially around 40%. This admixture occurred primarily in the Mediterranean region before the population migrated northward into Central and Eastern Europe. Key factors was Roman-era migration exile, right? So following the Roman conquest of Judea in the 1st and 2nd centuries, the destruction of the Second Temple, 70 CE, many Jews were taken to Italy as slaves. So my father's ancestors were taken as slaves or migrated as free people seeking better opportunities. This established a large Jewish community in the Roman Empire. These early Jewish men in Italy likely intermarried with local Italian and Greek Hellenized women who converted to Judaism. Exactly. So that's why a lot of the Ashkenazi Jews have DNA from converted Italian women. Right. Right. So some studies, particularly on mitochondrial DNA and mtDNA, which is inherited from the mother, suggest that as much as 80% of Ashkenazi maternal lineages may trace back to European women, with the closest matches found in Italy. This implies widespread assimilation of local women in the Jewish community at that time, right? So paternal lineage, in contrast, Y DNA inherited from the father in Ashkenazi Jews remains predominantly of Near Eastern Levantine origin, supporting the theory of Middle Eastern men marrying local European women. Population bottleneck. The ancestral Ashkenazi population underwent a significant population bottleneck, a sharp reduction in population size, followed by expansion before and during their migration in Central and Eastern Europe. Around 1,000 years ago, this event concentrated the existing genetic mix, including the Italian Southern European components, across the entire descendant population. So this historical process resulted in modern Ashkenazi Jews having a genetic profile that is roughly a 50-50 mix of Levantine and Southern European, Italian, Greek ancestry, with additional minor contributions from Northern and Eastern Europe. That's why a lot of Ashkenazi Jews can look Italian. And one of my sisters, for example, looks very Italian, right? The Rebbe scolded him. Dylan is a putz. What the fuck about skin color DNA nonsense? The Romans raped the Jewish women. Okay, ask any Reb if Jews are a racist skin color. So absurd. Exactly. For Kakfa, rebellion against Rome, Jews almost defeated Rome. Exactly. The Apostle Paul was more Jewish than all of you. Sure. His name is like literally Paul. What kind of Jew has the name of Paul? Paul is somebody who is either assimilated into Goyish culture or not Jewish at all. Because what Jew... You won't go to a Jewish community and see any Jew with the name Paul. Ever. Unless they are not religious. Right? And so... one of my friends also brought up the argument that, he says that the fact that Paul needed to, he didn't know Jewish scripture, he had to go to the Septuagint. He had to refer to the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Bible, and he had to use that as his reference to write his Gospels. It shows that this Paul individual wasn't Jewish, or if he was completely Hellenized, and so he wasn't of the Jewish culture. He was secular. You know, he wasn't keeping in the tradition of the Torah, right? Yeah, he wrote the what do they call it? They call it his Corinthians, right? Let them enjoy the Moroccans and Egyptian Arabs, karma. How now Christian Italy is under the invasion of African Muslim migrants, just like Christian Spain, with what a great disappointment, exactly. Apostle unto the gospel of God, which he had promised by his prophets in the Holy Scriptures concerning his son Jesus, Christ your Lord, which was made of the seed of David according to the flesh. Whatever, listen, enjoy your gibbos. Enjoy your gibbos. Like Motorhead says, gibbos. Okay. Okay. So the Christians claim that their book is the New Testament, right? But within a few centuries after the death of Jesus, the Christians themselves are confronted with the same problem the Jews had faced, plagued with a rash of heretic Christian sects, which claimed that their new teachers of righteousness were messiahs with supplementary gospels. The church gradually canonized its New Testament, completed by around 500, as the best solution against its being polluted with false doctrine. On pain of death, the church banned all other gospels about Jesus, then current, except those it had chosen for the canonization. Jesus, the church claimed, had said all there was to say in its authorized works. Having thus locked out further revelation from God, the Jews had maneuvered themselves into a corner. How could God now communicate new ideas to his chosen people? How could he write their second act script if scripture was no longer open for new ideas? The Jews had three choices. They could unlock the Old Testament, they could abandon the idea of a manifest destiny, or they could write the script themselves. They chose the third alternative. But would a script written by man have the same validity as one written by God? Jewish leaders would not entertain, still less admit the possibility of such a blasphemous idea as man writing a divine script. Yet there was a path through the theological cul-de-sac. When the Torah was revealed to man, had it not become subject to human error? Once the Torah had been given to man, had not authority for interpreting it passed from heaven to earth? Surely, if God had destined the Jews to carry out his will, he had intended solutions to all problems to be contained in his already published guideline, the Torah. All they had to do was search the Torah for the right answers and a way of writing a divine script with the implied consent of God would be found. Search the Torah and search it again, for everything is in it, says an old Jewish adage. The task of searching for God's intent in the already revealed texts was taken over by a body of self-appointed diaspora designers. To give their utterances the stamp of authenticity, they retroactively trace their authority as script writers back to Moses, in much the same manner as the gospel writers gave Jesus the stamp of authenticity as a Messiah by tracing his ancestry back to David. Listen, we don't even have this guy named Jesus. We don't even have his genetics to compare his genes to the genetics of David. Right? Right? That's the thing, you know, like people are like, oh, you Jews you're not, they say, you Jews, you're not the real Jews, you're Canaanites, you have Canaanite DNA. Either way, it proves that we come from there. But anyway, we don't really have, or do we? Do we have the remains of a ancient Israelite, like from before the slavery in Egypt? Do we have the remains of one ancient person, and do we have enough evidence, like enough genetic material to test it, to see if it matches the Canaanite DNA? You know what I mean? Like, the whole thing makes no sense because we don't really have a way to test the ancient Jewish DNA that we know that we have today to Abraham's DNA. But either way, we know that Abraham comes from Ur Kasdim, which is Iraq. So obviously he would have Iraqi DNA. So the true Jew would have Iraqi genetics, according to this logic. You know what I mean? The book of Romans is the only book in the Bible addressed to all nations. Sure. Where is the Ottoman Empire? Where are the Umayyads? Where is the Syrians and the Babylonian states? Where are the Persians? They have all fallen. But God is chosen. People are still here. Caesar was supposed to return, right? Where is he? Has it been 2 days since Caesar left? I can't see Caesar. I can't see Sargon. I can't see Caligula. I can't see Alexander. None of them are here. Israel is here. Right, so Ahammer says, Jesus is the one who said, search scriptures, for in him ye think ye have eternal life, and they are they which testify to me, of me. Right, so it looks like the Christians, they took the Tanakh, right, and whatever is written in there, they take for themselves, and then they make it their own, and they say it's theirs. Isn't that hilarious? So funny. Right, most topics about the past are outside of science, not even in the realm of science fiction, just... Exactly. So, back to... the first diaspora designers were rabbis, that is, teachers of Judaism, who after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, broke the power of the priesthood and took over the task of interpreting Judaism for the people. They designed a new Jewish science of divine jurisprudence, which became known as the oral law, as distinct from the Torah, or the written law. In searching the Torah for new meanings, the rabbis, of course, insisted that they were merely affirming old truths. There is nothing new in this, for in trying to sell new ideas, leaders usually emphasize the affinity of the new with the old. Oh, it's so funny. This guy is so cynical. This author is funny. He's so cynical. He's not willing to give the Jews... He's not letting the Jews off the hook, my friends. The new oral law did not spring from the brains of Jewish diaspora designers, complete with footnotes. We have seen how in Jewish history the response persisted in appearing prior to the challenge itself. Before God sends a new illness... Oh, this is what we said about yesterday, right? Before God sends a new illness to the Jews, he has already provided the cure. Exactly. That's the Jewish saying, what we said yesterday, right? So... I think that's the theme of this book, is saying how this is the key, the secret to Jewish survival, which is just brilliant bitches. Notice how Tucker attacks dispensationalism because we don't follow post-replacement theology that the church replaced Israel. I don't understand. Don't understand. Sorry. So he has already provided a cure, goes the Jew saying. Just as the Torah constitution preceded the Jewish state, just as the prophets preceded the exile to Babylon, just as Ezra and Nehemiah preceded the diaspora, so the new oral law came as a response to long before the first diaspora challenge actually confronted the Jews. As a matter of fact, the concept of oral law was over 300 years old when the diaspora designers seized it and shaped it as a tool useful for their own ends. The seed of oral law were sown in the 5th century BC, in the early days of Persian domination, by two men who had they lived to hear it, would have declared it. So it was designed by two men who had they lived to hear it, would have declared it blasphemous. Basically, this guy is so cynical in his view on how the Talmud came about, and he is also really funny. And, you know, this by no way discredits the Jewish story because whether you like it or not, the Jewish people exist, and nobody is what's that noise? Nobody is pushing Judaism on you. So whether any of this is true, whether the Torah is true, whether Judaism as a religion is legitimate, it's irrelevant, because it doesn't matter, because the only thing that really matters is that we exist and we're still alive. That's the only thing that matters. And the only thing that matters is that the non-Jews cannot kick us out of our homeland and try to murder us. That's the only thing that matters, right? Whether Judaism is true or false, it only matters to the Jews, and it matters to the Christians, because they base their entire book off of Jewish scripture. They basically plagiarize and steal Jewish scripture to legitimize their new blasphemous pagan religion. So that's the only way Judaism, the Tanakh, is relevant to the non-Jews and to the Muslims, right? If the Christians and the Muslims would just sever the connection of their Bible, if they would just create a new religion altogether that has nothing to do with Judaism, they would be better off. But somehow, by them attaching themselves to Judaism, they are giving Judaism legitimacy, right? And it's just ridiculous because it doesn't really matter whether Judaism for the non-Jew it wouldn't matter to the non-Jew whether Judaism is true or false, because if they wouldn't have done the silly thing that is to attach their religion to Judaism, that was a very stupid move on their part, really. So, you know what I mean? Like, the whole thing is ridiculous. I don't know. You know what I mean? The Romans still rule the world through the Pope. Yep, that's the truth. And indeed, the Pope is in Rome. So, a summary of anthropocentric, monist, monotheistic, deterministic thought, a saying that appeals to intelligent people. The Romans destroyed Jerusalem and scattered the Jews, but eventually Rome was forced to adopt the Jewish Messiah and God to maintain control. Yep. It wasn't the Jewish God. They adopted their own. They took a Jewish man and made him into their God to control Rome. That's the only reason why, Christianity was created. It was to unite the people and to control the people through religious government, right? Right? In the comments on this link, there was a Christian smarter than you. He couldn't answer my questions. If he can, I will be waiting. Is the Jewish God only God of the Jews or the non-Jews too? The Jewish God is, whether you like it or not, he is creator of heaven and earth. The God of Israel, the one invisible God of Israel, is the creator of heaven and earth. You don't have to worship him, and that's fine. That's your decision. We don't push it on you, but that's our belief. So, you know what I mean? That's our belief, and you're entitled to believe what you want. That's the beauty of freedom of religion, right? The one God that made Israel also made the non-Jews. The one invisible God of Israel, who is not of a form or an image, who is not a man. Okay? The God that we worship is infinite, invisible God of Israel, Almighty Creator God. He is not to be seen. He has no image and no face, and he is not of the flesh. You believe in a man God, so you believe in something else, right? And the Jewish God, the one invisible God of Israel that is not of the flesh, he created all the peoples. But somehow you decided to worship a man, his creation. Bottle is one singular, infinite, absolute mind. Saul is Paul. The Pope banned the Bible for 1500 under penalty of death until Martin Luther started the Reformation. Hi again. Have you looked into biblical criticism? I'd like to in this type of format. What? Septuagint remove Isaiah 2.22 and modified, edited translation from Hebrew. Hi, Shawnee baby. God is a man ho. Yep. That's the truth, my friends. Hey. They were none other than our Persian Jewish zealots, Ezra and Nehemiah, in their zeal to preserve Mosaic Judaism as they saw it. And of course, they saw it in the same way God would see it. Ezra and Nehemiah decreed that the 5 canonized books of Moses should be read aloud in every synagogue at special intervals every week. They also decreed that interpreters should be on hand to explain difficult Hebrew passages, because the man in the street no longer spoke Hebrew but Aramaic. But before the 6th century BC, Aramaic was the language of the cultured and the aristocratic in this Semitic world, in the same way that French was the language of the European courts during the Baroque age. After the 6th century BC, however, after the Babylonian exile, Aramaic became the lingua franca, the common speech of the plebeians, in the same way that English today has become a world language. The task of explaining the Hebrew text of the Torah to the Aramaic-speaking Jews of Judah was entrusted to a group of men called ciphers, literally bookmen, but better known as scribes because the Gospels refer to them by that name. But instead of dutifully inquiring the meaning of an obscure Hebrew word, practical-minded listeners rudely asked how obscure laws could be reconciled with current needs. Determined not to show their ignorance or do themselves out of a job, the scribes transformed themselves from Torah explainers to Torah interpreters. They began to improvise the answers. So, as you can see, this guy who's Jewish, who writes this book, is narrating how he thinks. He takes facts, right? How the Talmud came about, how the Mishnah came about, and in his cynical, realistic, but mocking, and he's mocking it, and he is making fun. He's making fun of what happened here, and he is kind of degrading it and kind of not being so nice about how it came about, right? But this is his point of view, how he thinks. He's making fun of what he thinks, why the interpreters came about, right? But this is his point of view. Obviously, he's not a Torah Jew, and this author is not a Torah Jew, and he is not a religious Jew, and he's probably not someone who believes in religion. And while I can appreciate his point of view, because you see, this is his narration, the way he writes it, right? You have to understand that, every book has excuse me, not all books, but some books have an agenda. Not all books are purely factual and without any agenda. Like, the guy here has some form of agenda, from mocking what happened and twisting it to what he thinks, why things were done in a certain way, and also from his point of view, right? And while bringing facts, but also putting his own narration into it, right? It makes it, and part of his agenda is to explain how Jewish people survived, right? Him being a Jew himself. But you can see here that he himself is probably not somebody who is he's not a believer, right? Which is funny, and I can appreciate the way he narrates, even though it's a little bit mean. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, Cantor and Godel who mashed. I'm reading all your comments. Hashem, God said no human sacrifice. God will give the earth to the Jews, but He will give the stars to the church. Dozens of times in the Hebrew scripture, no man, God, no human sacrifice. Exactly. church burned alive, heretics, African slave trade, imperialist, colonialist, global crusades, inquisitors, forced conversions, Holocaust. No, thank you. The purpose of the Jews was to make God known to all the nations, and it has been fulfilled. Not really. That's not the purpose, but okay. Because you guys don't acknowledge God. If our mission has been fulfilled, then you would be believing in the invisible God of Israel, but you're not. You believe in a man God, which is, it's against the Ten Commandments. So our purpose has not been fulfilled. So we're not done. we're not finished here. We're not finished here, friends. Excuse me. We're not done. You're not blessed through us because the Christians are rebelling against. The Christians have rebelled against Almighty Invisible God of Israel. Do you know what I mean? So Christians have not really grasped who the God of Israel is. They made a mistake. Anyway, determined not to show their ignorance or to do themselves out of a job, the scribes transformed themselves from Torah. Like, I don't think this is nice the way he writes about. Oh, they didn't want them to do themselves out of a job, or they don't want to show themselves as not knowing anything, so they made themselves explainers and interpreters. They began to improvise answers. In the process, this is the way he thinks, in the process, they developed as a byproduct a new semantic science that became known as midrash, or exposition. They contended that the Torah contained all the answers, and that it was only a matter of searching scripture for the correct ones. The exposition used by these scribes in the early midrash was naive, allegory, and simple homiletics. Fortunately, as the audience did not surpass the scribes in intellect, their banalities passed for profundity. Whoa! Wait, fortunately, this guy is a comedian, my friends. Fortunately, as the audience didn't surpass the scribes in intellect, their banalities passed for profundity. What's banalities? So, banalities. Triteness. There's essential banality in the story tells. What's triteness? What's banalities? It's a trite, boring. Their boringness, basically, their boringness passed for what's the word? Profundity. Deep insight, great depth. Their boringness passed for deep messages of intelligence. This guy, I'm telling you, this guy who wrote this book is probably a atheist, God made non-Jews too, so according to you, we don't know him because we eat pork. No, you don't know him because you worship the wrong man. That's why. You worship the man. You don't worship the God of the Bible, right? Do you know what I mean? So, typical anti-Semitic ignorance. Missionaries. Okay, let's go see who this guy is. Dimont Max, because I need to just see if he's... I want to see if he's somebody who doesn't believe, if he's actually a atheist. Max Dimont, atheist. Let's see. Jews, God, and history. Dimont's book is not history. It's not even historical myth. It's not even historical myth making. The thing is, I want to know if he's like, this guy's an atheist or not. Because he doesn't say what he was, you know, like he was born to a Jewish family and he's a historian. What was his belief, right? He moved with his mother and siblings to the United States and moved to Cleveland, and he taught himself the language by reading Shakespeare. He claimed that he spoke Elizabethan English. What did he believe was his career? He published a book, Jews, God, and History, in 1962 to overwhelming success. The Los Angeles Times praised the book as unquestionably the best popular history of the Jews written in English language. He and his wife Ethel visited Israel for the first time following the publication. Between 1962 and 1994, Jews, God, and History sold over 1.5 million copies, was reprinted 17 times, and was translated into 6 languages. Dimont never made suffering the focus of his books, unlike many other Jewish historians, and instead exalted in the endurance of Jews. He was very interested in American Jewry, referring to it as a vigorous and healthy voluntary and something entirely new. He published his second book, The Indestructible Jews, which we're reading. Is There a Manifest Destiny in Jewish History in 1971, and his third, The Jews in America, The Roots, History, and Destiny of American Jews. I wonder what's going to be the destiny, according to him, right? His literary success saw him traveling across the United States, Finland, Israel, Brazil, Canada, South Africa, giving lectures on Jewish history. What was his own life? What was his belief? Right? A Search for the Historical Jesus was published in 1984 and 1992, respectively. 1977, he announced he was working on his first novel, Love and Loot, about GIs during World War II, but it was never published. Prior to his death, Dimont was working on an updated version of Jews, God, and History to include more recent events. He developed severe vision impairment and was nearly blind at the end of his life. His wife Ethel had always helped him write his books, oftentimes writing down what he dictated and listening to him read his book, reference books in their earlier years, and this book was no exception. Dimont died March 25, 1992, after undergoing heart surgery. Ethel finished writing The Jews, God, and History revision and published it herself in 1993. What was his thing? His personal life, right? Dimont spoke Finnish, Norwegian, Danish, Swedish, German, Yiddish, Hebrew, and English. Oh. He and his wife Ethel, a native of New York, married in 1946 and raised 2 daughters, Gail and Karen. Wait, his wife was a native of New York. Did he marry a Jew? They attended Temple Israel. Ethel died in 2013. It doesn't say if he was an atheist or not. It doesn't say what his beliefs are. He was probably married to Goethe, right? And he wrote all this stuff. And Facebook, the Jewish community. Let's see what people say about this book, right? I'm not Jewish, but I have many questions about Judaism. History, for one. Can anyone direct me to good books to start? People give him... Okay. What is this? He doesn't say what he believed, you know? I think this guy was an atheist. This guy was probably an atheist. Do you know what I mean? Buy a Motorhead. Banning Jesus is anti-Semitic. Golden ratio, divine proportion. Jesus is the most famous Jew of all time, yet you badmouth him. It's funny. Mishnah, Gemara, Talmud was given to Moshe and Sinai. Oral learning. Blog base. Okay. Yeah, I think A Hammer is a troll. He's trying to troll all of us. Isn't that so funny? Essence, your evolutionary history and your past will end with a spark of awareness that isn't even a spark. Do you truly deserve to burn in hell for eternity? This writer is a kind of agnostic atheist. You think he is somebody who is a knowing believer, like somebody who's believes in knowledge, because agnostic is not knowing, theist is believer. So what does that mean, right? ChatGPT says he was probably secular based on his books, but it doesn't know for sure. Thanks. Interesting. 391. Because you can have like people who are secular, but they are spiritual. You know what I mean? So, right? Based on what I've read, I can say he is an agnostic theist. What does that mean in monist? Oh. Yeah, I told you no. Wait a second. I have to send her a message. Custom message. Hey. Hey, hey, how are you? I'm doing a live session on YouTube. Oh, oh no, wait, enjoy. Maybe I'll call you after if you're available. Oh yeah, that guy answered. Let's go see what the guy has to say. The other guy who is... LOL, now you ignore facts by redefining terms. Still total nonsense. Modern Palestinians are descendants of the original inhabitants, even more than modern Jews. Really? Given that you are totally evidence averse, nothing will even make you consider your delusions might need revisions. This is just a waste of my time. Then why are they Muslim? Why are they Muslim of the Muslim faith, sir? Oh well. Islam wasn't a thing back then. But okay. I'm the delusional one. No one cares, sir. But this was indeed very enlightening. Enlightening, since you clearly are stumped and have no answer. Okay. So, when you finish, I need to see the chapter when it ends. Okay. My friends. Hey. Where were we? I can't get through this. Do you know what I mean? I can't get through this. We have to get through this, my friends. Either Talmud, you'll see that it does not make sense. The Talmud is from Sinai. There is a lot there that came after 1,000 of disagreements. Whatever. Okay. The tranquil, non-intellectual life under Persian rule came to an end in the 3rd century BC with the Greek conquests. A new generation of Jews, educated in the ways of the skeptical Greeks, no longer accepted unquestioningly the naive biblical exegesis of the scribes, much as college-educated Christian youths today no longer accept the naive Christology that was taught by the church during the Middle Ages. The educated Jewish youth wanted better proof before accepting the Torah as a way of life. Our unsophisticated scribes were unequal to the task, and a new set of scholars known as Tanaz, from the Aramaic word to repeat, hence repeaters, took over. Instead of using the allegory and homiletics of the scribes, the Tanaz used the reason and logic of the Greeks. This more refined method of drawing a new interpretation from an old principle became known as Mishnah, from the Hebrew word to teach. A modern scholar succinctly states the origins of the Mishnah thus. The truth is that the entire Tanakh was only recorded, right? It was only written down right before the Second Temple was destroyed. And the reason why it was written down is because they knew the temple would be destroyed and they were afraid the law would get lost. And the thing is that if that is so, that the Tanakh was written down, then where did these people that wrote it down in that era get the information from? Right? They must have gotten it orally from their fathers to son, father to son, father to son. And then they wrote it down, and it's all the oral law. But it became the written law. And so it could be said that the entire Tanakh is the oral law. Right? And so... Right? So... what's the argument? Right? What's the argument? If you learn, he believes in a single God, believes that Moses received revelation, believes in the Ten Commandments, but may think that some of the stories are mythology. This makes him a monist, not a full theist. But he is skeptical about some of the things he believes, which makes him agnostic. It's very sophisticated, secular, spiritual, but faithful to Jewish identity. Right? Yeah, so that guy that is commenting on my channel, he's basically, he's stumped. I think he's stumped. Right? We go to community, for example. Where is it? Sort by newest. Hold on. Then why are they of the Muslim faith? LOL, Islam wasn't a thing back then. But okay, I'm the delusional one. No one cares, but this was indeed very enlightening since you clearly are stumped and have no answer. Alright, here's my arguments, right? Yeah, I don't know why it disturbs me. I guess it's the anti-Semitic vitriol of like saying you need to get out of this country. The Arabs belong here, right? You are the ones, you need to get out, dirty Jew, you know? Secular, spiritual, but faithful to Jewish identity. I believe that a significant part of the legal content of the Talmud is important in terms of Jewish identity. Could this be Little England again? Could be. We don't know. We don't know. Okay, so a modern scholar succinctly states the origins of the Mishnah thus. The development of commerce and trade under the Hasmonean rulers peremptorily called for the building up of a code of civil law. The few rules found in scripture bearing on this branch of the law were not sufficient and could not be made so. Not even by the most subtle reasoning or the cleverest interpretation. The time was certainly ripe for legislation. Every student of the history of jurisprudence knows that great as are the possibilities of interpretation and commentation, an old code has limits beyond which it cannot be stretched. When the breaking point is reached, legislation comes to the rescue, abrogating obsolete laws and adding new ones which conform to the demands of the age. But how dare one tamper with sacred scripture in which the divine will is revealed? The sages and scholars of that time had the necessary temerity. They took a very important step toward formulating what might be called de facto, though not de jure, a new code. They created the Mishnah, right? So this new judicial science of Mishnah, founded around 200 BC, was a hit-and-miss proposition. However, it floundered between occasional brilliance and frequent mediocrity. It It badly needed a methodology, a scientific approach that would give it a consistent professional touch. In his wondrous way, God provided the right man at the right time. His name was Hillel, the founder of scientific Mishnah. With him, the Tanakh period proper begins. So this was like before, because Hillel was living in the time of Hillel, right? Hillel, sage. Hillel the elder, right? Hillel was living in the time, lived when? Right? So he lived in the time of the Second Temple, probably. The late Second Temple period. His Hillel, you know, the life of Hillel. Did you guys ever watch the video, The Life of Hillel? I think I have it in my... I watched the video once with you guys, and the puppet show, right? Yes, I agree. It can be very important, but they make new laws and rules, and they discuss historical events which happen after Torah, and they include scientific knowledge of the time. Even Orthodox scholars would agree to this. They just don't tell the common people. I don't understand. But valuable for cultural and spiritual identity. I don't know. You know, like I'm a simple person, so let's go and see the let's go and see if we can find The Life of Hillel, where we watched it. What? No. Live. Go and look for Hillel. Does Hillel live here? So let's go see the videos. Hillel. No, we never watched it. The Life of Hillel. Let's go and see here. Da 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 da. And I'll cut up some potatoes and I'll cut up some tomatoes. Oh, the delicious meal. On the onions smell divine with this little bit of wine. I want to show you the song. Hold on. This is who they're talking about. Hello.
Israel. You know, Sarah, sometimes I just can't understand people. Yesterday I was just beside myself. What happened? I don't want to keep my... In go these potatoes, then I'll cut up some tomatoes.
Oh, delicious sweet cuisine. Oh, the onions smell divine with this little bit of wine. And the peppers, oh, the luscious green. This meal is fit for a king. Ingredients are the very best.
I haven't overlooked a thing. I'm sure it will please all well guessed. The bread has risen nice and high. It is sure to
Satisfy.
Here's my famous lentil soup. There's enough to feed a troop. And the fish, my, what a sight. Bit of lemon, that's just right. The rice is also white. Vegetables are nicely steamed.
This delicious meal, yes, this will be easy.
Terribly sorry for the delay.
Yes, I will.
No,
you
you
won't.
won't. Yes,
Of course I will.
Absolutely not.
Look, no matter how great Hillel...
Yes, this is a story of Hillel that we watch, right? And I think... So he lived in that time of the Second Holy Temple, and he was known as the most patient man to ever have lived, right? valuable for cultural and spiritual identity. People struggling in the swamp of drugs, hedonism, and nihilism on American streets. There was not a story of Purim at Sinai, but there is a Talmud Megillah. What? Purim was about basically Jews being killed and stuff. Jews, like, being saved from destruction. Most of our holidays are about the destruction that we were saved from, so... Excuse me, rude. Anyway, back to the story. I feel like something is missing. I need to eat something. Yes, this food will be ideal. And I'll cut up some potatoes and I'll cut up some tomato. Oh, delicious meal. And the onions smell divine. Maybe Dina wants to join in the conversation. Do you want to be part of my channel and like and like comment stuff one day? Oh well. Without your face, of course. Face or identity, of course. Okay, so where were we? I'm having trouble here. Yeah, so it talks about Hillel, and it goes on to talk about him. I need a bathroom, and I will be right back, okay? But in the meantime, I will put a music. Reiki healing music. Okay. back to where we were. Where were we? I have more than what you think you have read. I believe that the Torah and the commandments are part of God's divine guidance along with history. Sorry, didn't I just join later and responding to his comment that the Torah, Mishnah, and Talmud are from Sinai. In fact, not even all 5 books of Torah was given in Sinai. It could be argued, it could be argued that the Torah the Torah, the 5 books of Moses is actually, it's the oral Torah. And they just wrote it down so that, to keep a record. So it's all given from word of mouth, from father to son, and then it was just written down. So it could be argued that even the later on books that were written by the rabbis were also all the oral Torah. It was all the same, coming from the same place. Do you know what I mean? And so it's just a matter of whether you believe in Judaism, in the Tanakh at all, or you don't, or you do. If you're a religious person or you're not. And that's fine. You don't have to be a religious person. Do you know what I mean? My baby. Right? My baby. So, back to here, right? Okay, legend persists in depicting Hillel, born sometime after 100 BC, died sometime after 10 AD, as a yokel who drifted from Babylon to Jerusalem in search of a higher education. Having no financial means, he is said to have climbed the roof of an academy to eavesdrop on a class. One day the roof caved in and Hillel fell into the classroom, thus becoming, presumably, history's first drop-in. Impressed with such a thirst for knowledge, the academy, so the story goes, granted him a scholarship. And in true Horatio Alger tradition, he graduates magna cum laude and rose from the rags of a pauper to the silks of a president of the Sanhedrin. Hillel may have come from Babylon to Jerusalem, and he did become the president of the Sanhedrin, but his was no Horatio Alger story. His parents were rich merchants, and he was 40 years old when he came to Jerusalem, where his vast erudition earned him attentive awe. It is more likely that he came to teach rather than to study. Legend attributes to him a knowledge of 70 languages, but 7 seem more probable. Thoroughly familiar with the Greek literature, thought, and science, he taught his rabbinic pupils to keep up with progress in science if they wished to be the keepers of a viable Judaism. Hillel's greatest contribution was in laying a scientific foundation for the new Mishnah. The demand of the intellectuals to prove divine assertions by reason had to be met, and Hillel did this with his 7 midot, his 7 rules, for properly deriving new concepts from old through the use of logic. His theory was that if a deduction could be shown to stem logically from a divine proposition, then the deduction had to be as divine as the source. In essence, Hillel designed the intellectual apparatus for an orderly evolution of divine principles. Right? Let's go back to the... One second. I want to go read the notes. Okay, Louis Ginsburg. On Jewish law and lore, many scholars today believe that Hillel was born in Alexandria and not in Babylonia, which would seem more like in view of his knowledge of Greek. Okay. But it was said that he had a round head of some sort of flat feet, so... Until modern times, it was assumed that Hillel's 7 rules were based solely on Aristotelian logic, but modern scholars have shown that in reality, Hillel's syllogisms went beyond those of his Greek masters, approximating the methods used in modern logic today. For instance, one of his rules, known as Binyam ab is almost identical to that of John Stuart's Mill method of agreement. Hillel's Binyan Ab was used by rabbis to discover new laws of scripture in much the same way that Mill's method of agreement was used by the scientists 18 centuries later to discover new laws of nature. This new scientific method of tampering with the Torah was, of course, not accepted by all Jews with equanimity. The Mishnah was rejected in the main by the Sadducees, the party that generally hewed to the pre-exilic Judaism of priest, temple, and sacrifice, but it was accepted in the main by the Pharisees, the party that generally embraced the post-exilic Judaism of rabbis, synagogue, and prayer. In Act 2, we shall see how future diaspora designers seized this living, pragmatic Mishnah and turned it into a vehicle for new ideas to serve the Jews in coming centuries. Just as the diaspora was the accidental but physically essential ingredient in Jewish survival, we shall see the oral law becoming the purposive but spiritually essential ingredient in that survival. Instead of the divine director of our first act, it will be rabbinic diaspora designers in the second act, who will sit in the director's chair and guide the fate of the Jews on the chessboard of world history. As the knights, bishops, and kings of the opposition converge upon the Jews, these diaspora designers will play mainly a defense game, sacrificing a peripheral pawn here and there, but saving the main pieces for the crucial third act. In order to survive in this second act, the diaspora Jews will have to respond successfully to 6 successive challenges of history, namely the impact of Rome, the rise of the Parthian Sassanid Empire, the triumph of Islam, the paradox of feudalism, the regression of the ghetto, and the lure of rationalism. We shall see the oral law come to the rescue in response to the first 5 challenges, but fail in the response to the 6th. After an 1800-year rule, we will behold the oral law designers toppled from their pinnacle of power by a new breed of non-rabbinic Jewish laymen who will take over the task of Jewish survival in the 19th and 20th centuries. In this act, it will be the destiny of the Jews to live outside their homeland, within the context of other civilizations. Because of this, Jewish history will no longer be a linear history, but a succession of 6 tangential circles representing the 6 societies within which it will evolve. During these 20 centuries, Judaism will not be molded by internal forces alone, but by external factors as well. Therefore, to understand this twofold evolution of Judaism, it will be as necessary to outline the external societies in which Jewish history evolves, as it will be to clarify the internal structure of Jewish society itself. Let us now return to our seats and await the beginning of the second act of our Kabbalistic drama, the 2,000-year span of Shavirat HaKelim, the antithesis. It will begin with the destruction of the temple in the 1st century and end with the founding of the modern state of Israel 2 millennia later. Notably, Louis Jacobs, in his studies in Talmudic logic and methodology. Okay, hold up. The whole thing is right. The foundation of my belief is not Jesus or any anthropomorphic God, but the unseen singular God of Moses, which is why what you wrote holds no authority. What did he say? You made a lot of points. I can't respond to all of them, but as far as I can tell, you can't really say anything about God. What I wrote is thesis produced against Christianity's concept of sin, hell, and a heaven created from nothing. Moses wrote the Torah from divine revelation. The Talmud is rabbinic history, not law. Moses didn't really recorded, it seems. It was more like, it is said that he wrote the Torah, but where that first record is gone, it seems, and it was only written, the Torah was written again, you know, that which was passed from the time of Moses down to those who wrote the Tanakh, right, in the Second Temple period. It was the oral law. The Tanakh, as we know it, is the oral law. It was given from father to son, father to son, father to son, through the mouth, through storytelling. And that storytelling was written in the 5 books that we know now today as the Tanakh. So it can be argued that that is the oral law, which is the law. And then the Talmud is just a continuation of that oral law. So if you know, it's up to you whether you want to believe. It's up to you whether you want to believe in the Tanakh as being true or false. From what I seem to understand, you know what I mean? So like all the Christians that say somehow that, oh, the Talmud is demonic and it's the oral law and it's not legitimate, blah blah blah. It can be argued that the 5 books of Moses is also the oral law. So if you believe in the Tanakh, you're also believing in the rabbi's oral Torah, right? The God of Moses is the same as Plato's God, not Jesus, not Allah or Muhammad. You call yourself a Jew, but call the founder of Jewish history Moses a liar. No. Independent of Moses, personally, the ideal of a singular God is perfect. Plato is ideal. Like Egypt is Aten, fallacious arguments, and Christians. Man's logic makes God laugh. Makes God laugh. Are you God? Do you know? Yeah, so now we're up to... Wait a second. Borrowing the book again. Excuse me. I forgot there's some raspberry. My little baby snoring. Yeah. This is my baby. I love you. Wait. Right, so we got through this, right? So let us now return to our seats and await the beginning of the second act of our Kabbalistic drama, the 2,000-year span of Shavirat HaKelim, the antithesis. It will begin with the destruction of the temple in the 1st century and end with the founding of the modern state of Israel 2 millennia later, right? So the first challenge, the expanding society of the Roman world, the grandeur that was Rome. I don't know if you want to read this now, because I don't know if I have the patience. Oh, this is going to be a very good chapter, my friends. Right, Raspberry? See, reading is work, my friends. Actually, one second. It's going to talk about a love affair with the Romans and the Jewish girl. That should be spicy. That should be spicy, my friends. Right? By oral law, do you mean dictated by God? Meaning, all the oral law is, right? It is argued, the Jewish rabbis argue that the Talmud, the arguments in the Talmud, that which is written after, is the law given over through father to son, through the mouth and through prophecy and through from what they know going back thousands of generations. It's like a lot of traditions have, if you go look at the Hinduism, for example, a lot of their myths are passed down, a lot of their stories are passed down orally, so they know it as, it's just legend, and it's something that they know from their grandparents, right? And so it could be argued that the written law, as we know it, the Tanakh, was also, as we know it, as the Jewish people know it, it is something that was given from father to son, orally. What happened at Mount Sinai was spoken from father to son, from father to his children, and mother to their children, right? And it was passed down through the generations. It was never written down. If it was, that copy was lost, and what was written in the Second Temple period, that we know as the Masoretic, I think the Masoretic text, was written down. It was the oral law, which was given from the revelation at Mount Sinai, right? What they heard at Mount Sinai, and that which they heard from God, they passed it down through the mouth, orally, stories, legends from father to son, and finally they wrote it down in the Second Temple period in order to record it for the future. So it can be argued that that which we know as the 5 books of Moses is actually the oral law, and the rabbinic tradition, right, of continuation of this oral law, which we know as the Talmud, is also from Mount Sinai. It can be argued. So it can be argued that if you believe in the Tanakh and the 5 books of Moses as being authentic and from God, then you should also believe in the rabbinic authority, and you should also basically accept the fact that the written law, as you know it, is the oral law. That's the argument. Do you understand? The Talmudic argument are like philosophical debates, scholastic Christian mindset. Psalm 2 says God will laugh at the raging heathen. I'm the heathen. A culture devoid of thought and debate makes people stupid, like medieval Europe. Euler and plague and misery. Yes, the Talmud is rabbinic discussion, not law. It's discussion of the law, right? And the Mishnah, which was written down by the rabbis, by Hillel, it says, and the Mishnah and the prophets and all that is orally passed down, and it was only written down to keep a record. So it could be argued that that which is written down is also a myth, if you choose to believe it or not, right? And to say that somehow what came later, right, from the rabbis is somehow not legitimate because it's not from the 5 books of Moses, can be argued that the 5 books of Moses was also given down orally, and then it was written down just like the Talmud was written down later on. So you know, it can be argued that if you don't believe in oral law, then you shouldn't believe in the 5 books of Moses. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Now let's try my argue. They both say they are different traditions. Aren't the drafters of civil law making innovations today in the name of the social contract? Are you violating these in the name of innovations? Making many books, there is no end, and much study is weariness of the flesh. Ecclesiastical Solomon 12.12. It can be argued. It depends on what you want to believe. Do you know what I mean? It's like the Christians are very narrow-minded in the way that they think, oh, the only books that are actually truth is the Tanakh, the 5 books of Moses. And the oral law, that which we know today, which the rabbis wrote for the Jews to follow, like the laws that we actually follow today, which, it's not written in the Tanakh, it's written, it says certain things and the rabbis explain what it means in the Tanakh. And that's a lot of the laws that we know today are from the oral law, right? It can be argued that if you don't believe in the Tanakh, right? If you don't believe in the oral law, what the rabbis say, and the explanations for what they gave to how to follow what's written in the Tanakh, then you shouldn't believe in the Tanakh either, because the Tanakh is also the oral law, and it was just written down. And who's to say that that which was written down in the Tanakh is anything of value and anything of truth? And so that's all I'm saying. Is just like, think about it. You know what I'm saying? And then why should you believe in any religion altogether? I'm just asking questions, my friends. I'm just asking questions. Do you know what I mean? Man's laws are civic, originally based on the divine law, but the Romans perverted it. Well, who's to say what's divine and what's civic? Do you know what I mean? Choose your poison. The Jewish state had, by all measures, the least enslaving, most compensational, and fine-oriented penal legal system. Right, so the way the Jewish system was set up was very humane. It was an eye for an eye, which means that, like in what we discussed in the book earlier, they said the way the ancient pagans used to mete out justice was to go and basically two people are fighting over something. They say, oh, this person stole my house, right? This guy stole my woman. How are you supposed to know who is right and who's wrong? Fight it out. That's how they would do it. Fight it out. Walk through fire. If you survive, whoever, both of you walk through fire, or you both fight it out, and whoever wins is the victor, and God is obviously with them. That was the justice of the pagans. The Jews came and said, no, an eye for an eye, right? Meaning, if someone pokes at one eye, you're not allowed to poke out two. And you don't just leave justice up to survival of the fittest. That's not just, right? The Jewish law is what brought real civil justice to the world, fairness and equality. So that's the argument of the Jewish argument. If you're going to go and actually, if you think that the Jewish argument is the strongest and the most truthful, then you would believe in the Tanakh, right? If you don't, you'd believe in the Tanakh and what the rabbis say. Otherwise, if you don't believe in that, then you can be a pagan and you can worship the gods of the Mordu and the gods that go and have sex with other men's wives and have babies, which are goddesses and gods, other gods and bastard gods, right? So you can believe in those gods, or you can believe in the 10 Commandments of the Jews, right? But then you have to accept also the rabbinic law, because who's to say that the 5 books of Moses is not oral law? The 5 books of Moses is the oral law, and it was written down from what we know it to be today. So make up your mind, choose your poison, make up your mind, decide what you believe, right? Please give you a definition of the oral law. If you read the Torah, it says it is divine revelation, which is the foundation of all other writings. Okay, regardless of what it says. Do you know what I mean? Regardless of what it says. I'm not sure if you guys are understanding my argument. Do you know what I'm saying? The alphabet itself was a divine revelation from God and first used by Moses. So you don't really believe in the God of the Bible. A hammer, you don't believe in the Tanakh. Christians don't believe in the Tanakh, because if they did, then they would read it and they would see the contradictions between your Jesus Bible and the Bible of the Tanakh. That which you regard as true, if you go and read it side by side, you would see that your Bible is false. Both can't be true. Both religions can't be true. So you don't really believe in the Tanakh because you believe in your Bible. Both Bibles cannot be true, because if you read the Tanakh and you knew your own Bible, you would see the mistakes there. And you would see that one book is lying. And so one book is lying, one book is taken out of context, and one book is right? One book is lying, one book is taken out of context, and one book is a false book, which demands that you worship a man. So you do not believe, if you're a Christian, you cannot believe in the Tanakh, because there's no way. It doesn't work. It's not the way it works, my friend. I didn't invent the writings of Moses or the Old Testament. Okay, so, right? I'm not understanding your argument because I don't understand how you define oral law. That which is passed down from father to son. Legend, that which was given, story spoken by mouth to children, to friends, and through your communities. That which is told to you through the mouth, through your teacher teaching it to you, through your friend telling you a story, given over to you orally, as a story, as a legend, right? That is oral, through your mouth. That which is passed down through generation to generation. That's the argument, right? Until it was actually all those legends and all of those laws that were given orally to the Jewish nation was actually recorded and written down, right? And so it can be argued that the Tanakh in and of itself is the oral tradition. It's not necessarily the written law, as in God came down from Moses and wrote down all of these laws. Wrote it down in a page in a book, right? I guess. The only thing that is actually recorded as being written in stone is the Ten Commandments. The rest of it is commentary, and it is the oral law, as we know it. That's the tradition. So if you believe in the Tanakh, then you believe in the oral law, and you cannot reject the rabbinic oral law as well, because the Talmud is considered, and the Mishnah, it's all considered the oral law. So pick your poison. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to believe in something. Or you don't have to believe in anything, but, like, don't walk around thinking that somehow you are... Don't think that somehow you have the superior religion when it makes no sense, is all I'm saying, right? Like, you decide for yourself what's real and what's not. You know, according to the philosophy of what I think. Do you know what I mean? You can't reject what it says without rejecting it. What? What? Yeah, look at those who taught law to humanity. The Canaanites and Semites developed a legal system before you. They adopted written alphabets before you. With cuneiform and clay tablets. You were living in caves. You never even read the Tanakh. I have. Okay, thank you. Now I understand what you mean by oral law. But the 5 books is unique in Judaism. It was God telling Moses what to write. Yes, but it states that, you know, we don't have the original writing of the ancient Moses, right? He brought the 10 commandments in the stones, in the tablets, right? And all the tradition, it can be argued, that is written in the Tanakh and the 5 books of Moses, it can be argued is that the Jews heard it at Mount Sinai, and they spoke of what they saw and heard, and they passed down the tradition and the law from father to son orally, and they only recorded all of that we know as the 5 books of Moses. They only recorded it in the Second Temple period. So that is the oral law. And Christians reject the rabbinic law, right? That which we call the oral law today. They say, oh, we only accept the written law, not realizing that the written law is actually the oral law. And the rabbis are just continuing on the tradition of that which we know from thousands of years ago. And so it would be hypocritical to reject one and not accept the other. So my argument would be, why are you Christian if you believe the Tanakh is true? Why are you Christian? And why do you believe? And if you're a Christian, then and you believe that the rabbis are false, then why would you accept the Tanakh altogether? The whole thing is messed up, and it's ridiculous, and it makes no sense to me. That's all I'm saying. I'm not sure if you're following or if I'm explaining myself correctly in a clear way so you understand what I mean, right? Your ancestors were Netherlanders living in caves. If you are using ad hominem, be ready for a response. Right? Until you actually read both the Torah and the New Testament, you are only repeating what men have taught you. No, because I am reading the New Testament, okay? And I'm from a religious home, so as you know, we study the Tanakh, we study the Torah portion, we say the Tehillim, the Psalms of David, we learn every day our books, right? And right, I'm not repeating what men have taught me. I'm using my own mind after reading this book, reading other books, and trying to think logically from what I understand and know. Nobody has taught me this. Nobody is lecturing me in my ear. So I don't know where you think you get this information, where you think that somehow I'm being brainwashed by somebody, because there's nobody in my life that is talking to me about any of these issues. And I'm not even living a religious lifestyle right now, and I'm not even part of any community. So you can take your argument and understand that it makes no sense in my life. So whatever I am discussing with you right here is from myself. I'm not being brainwashed by anybody or influenced by any thoughts or any other people's rabbi's thoughts, right? JC couldn't even read the Christian book even if he lived in. According to Orthodox tradition, the 5 books were finished in the desert. I didn't realize you don't ascribe to this view. I'm not Christian. Because we don't have we have the tradition of the Ten Commandments that we know was, that's what Moses brought. And then it said that, yeah, he wrote it down. But then why is it that the rabbis sat down in the Second Temple and actually wrote down the Tanakh, right? Like, if they already had it written down somewhere, then why did they have to rewrite it? You know what I mean? Like, just asking. Just asking. Asking for a friend. All the Jews and the world speaking heathen English proves the New Testament is true. Why? The Code of Nam, the laws of Eshuna, and the Code of Hammurabi are humanity is first written legal tablets, and the Torah rationalized this on the basis of a single God without the perverse Roman mythology. You okay? Wait. English is the most important language in the world today. It comes from the King James Bible. So it doesn't, just because one language is dominant doesn't make it the truth. The languages is part of human what? I don't understand the argument. Not the whole world does not speak English, okay? Most people don't know English. It's Europe speaks English and that's it. And even Russians don't know English. Right? Handy listed these laws one by one yesterday. Because you do not base yourself on the abstract single God, your societies are corrupted with pornography, pedophilia, drug addiction, and youth lacking a sense of belonging. Good question. There is a law. Each king must write his own Torah. He that answereth the matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. You can't use logic to understand God. It is a divine revelation of the scripture, which you distort. You literally believe, you distort Jewish scripture, and then you embrace the New Testament, which lies about the divine revelation. You make no sense. You say that the Tanakh is a divine revelation, but yet you reject the Tanakh and you replace it with the New Testament, which lies about the Old Testament. So you're a hypocrite. You're literally a hypocrite, and you don't even realize it. Exactly. What is? I'm not for Palestine. We are dispensational and support the Jewish homeland. Well, doesn't matter who lives here. If you support the Jewish homeland, doesn't matter who lives here. For all you know, for the Christians, you might as well just come on you might as well just join the Palestine movement and come on a third crusade, and take over Israel and settle it for yourselves and will in your Jesus' second coming, right? Without the Jews. Positivism cannot meet the ethical needs of human society and human psychology. The Torah can do this. Example, Israel, right? So my argument is that the Ten Commandments, right, was written in stone that Moses brought us. It is said that Moses wrote down the Torah, the 5 books of Moses was written by him, but we don't have that copy. And then the rabbis rewrote it, and it can be argued that what they wrote, they knew from father to son, right? And they wrote it, and that's what we have today. And so the Christians say that the 5 books of Moses is the truth, but the truth was written by rabbis, right? And they know the truth from the legends, from the myths and the legends, from what they heard from Mount Sinai, from their great-grandparents, and somehow that is the truth. But when the rabbis continue on that tradition orally, explaining what they know through prophecy or whatever, somehow their oral tradition, the legends, that which is passed down from father to son, is false. But somehow the Tanakh is true. It makes no sense to me logically. But whatever, it's fine. These things don't have to make sense. Do you know what I mean? God is using Gentiles to provoke the Jews to jealousy. Jealous of who? Jealous of what? Jealous of who? Jealous of what? Look at the state of India, look at Africa, look at Pakistan. Israel has a unique ethical and legal understanding, a unique culture. You can not manipulate. So I will stir them to jealousy with those who are no people. I will provoke them with the foolish nations, Moses. So who is getting jealous of what and how? Explain yourself, because I don't really understand. So I don't know if you guys really understand my argument, but that's the argument, and we're after the first challenge, the expanding society, the Roman world, page 124, and it's a good book. It's been real, and just because we don't have Torah from back then doesn't mean they didn't have them. But we don't really have the physical evidence to back up the claims that somehow, because we don't even have the tablet that Moses brought to the Jews, right? It's all a matter of belief. You know what I mean? So it could be argued that Judaism is the truth because the Ten Commandments is true, and the way that it shaped civilizations to make things more fair and to bring actual humanity and to teach the world basic moral code. It could be argued that that's why Judaism is true, but you can't argue that somehow the 5 books of Moses is true, but the rabbis' books are not true. You can't argue that because it makes no sense. Do you get what I'm saying, or not really? If Hindus and Pakistanis, Arabs and Mexicans have such an equal and superior culture, why are they overrepresented in crime rates or lack of education? Exactly. Why do they kill their daughters, The Muslims, they murder their own kids. And it's completely normal in their culture. And they do it for honor, It could be argued, why... If their religion is so superior, right? Yeah, I'm just asking questions. Like Candace Owens. I'm just asking questions, she says. I'm just asking questions, right? Listen, I'm not trying to say Judaism is true or false. That's not what I'm here for. I'm just here to ask questions. Obviously, I believe that my religion is the truth, because obviously the non-Jews are crazy about us, so there must be something supernatural about us. So that's why I believe that we are the truth. But that's on a personal level. But you guys, what's your business? Why are you believing in this? You know what I mean? I agree we don't have the physical proof. To me, the strongest argument is the Khazari argument. I don't know what the Khazari argument is, even though I should look it up. Jews got rich in Protestant America to be a sign for the world. That's just your belief from what you see. Do you know what I mean? It's not based off of, it's not based off of the truth and reality of, why you believe your religious beliefs. If, the Christians have a lot to answer for, okay? On a human level, on a physical level, and on a spiritual level. They have a lot to answer for, and I'm just asking questions. You know what I mean? Thanks for your patience. I understand, because they claim they make for the Talmud and 5 books are different, and I'm not saying Talmud is fake. It's just different based on their claim. That's what they claim, but it debunks the whole theory if my line of thinking is correct at all, right? Then, if my arguments have any legitimacy to them, then the Christians have a lot to think about. Do you know what I mean? The fact that Jews are speaking English and English is the standard of the civilized world is to provoke you to jealousy. To provoke me to jealousy? Of who? To provoke me to jealousy of who? Who am I jealous of? Who would I be jealous of? Of what? Of who? Do you know what I mean? Does it make sense? Am I thinking at all correctly? Am I making any sense? Am I? I'm just wasting your time, my friends. Christian dogmatism has lost. It's just that the Christians and the Muslims have a lot to think about, you know what I mean? Especially the Christians. The Torah is called the law because it's from God. The Talmud is called oral because it's man's teaching. Who's to say that that's the whole argument? The Torah is called the law because it can be argued that the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, is actually not the written law. It's not from God. It can be said that it's the oral law. It's legend. It is only written down in the time of the Second Temple, right? And so where did it come from? If it was written down by man, literally, man sat down and wrote the 5 books of Moses, right? What they call the 5 books of Moses. And where did they get all this information from? If they didn't have the original manuscript, where is the original manuscript of Moses? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the question that I have. And, you know, the way that they had all this information from what we're taught as Jewish people is that they had the revelation at Mount Sinai, and then Moses brought the 10 Commandments, which was in stone. That's all we have. Some people say Moses wrote down the 5 books of Moses, but where's that manuscript? And what we're also taught is that the 5 books of Moses was given down orally, like the Hindus give down orally. They speak about their stories and their legends and the revelations of their religion. The same thing was with the Jews until they actually wrote it down, which we know as the Masoretic text, right? That Masoretic text that they wrote down all their stuff was from what they knew, that which was given to them, that which was passed down from generation to generation, from their fathers to their sons. So it can be argued that the 5 books of Moses is indeed the oral tradition that was written down. It's the oral law. And the rabbis that wrote down whatever they know, it's a continuation of that oral tradition. So if you're going to say that the rabbis, whatever the rabbis after the Second Temple wrote down is bunk, is garbage, then I think you might as well just throw out the oral law that was written down, the 5 books of Moses that was written down, right? You can throw that out just as well as you throw out the rabbinic commentaries, because that which we know, which was written down by those rabbis that wrote it down in the Second Temple period, that which we know, the Masoretic text, it could be said that that is the oral law as well. So how legitimate is that? If it's the oral law. That is what I'm saying. Do you know what I mean? So the question is, why do you believe in this at all? Throw it all out. Do you know what I mean? What's the Khazari argument? I need to look at it. Yeah. It's jealous because Israel turned to idols and Gentiles worship the Jewish God more than you. You worship idols. That's the thing. The Goyim that worship Jesus, they worship a pagan idol of the flesh. That which the Roman emperors used to do. They turned themselves into gods. They said, I am the God manifest in me. The emperors were worshipped as gods. Jesus is just the continuation of that. That is what we call pagan idolatry according to Judaism. That which is written in the 10 Commandments, which you are breaking as we speak. And you point fingers to the Jews and you say, oh, you are jealous of us because we worship the Jewish God and you... It's upside down, my friends. It's upside down. The pagan is calling the Jew who worships the God of Israel, who is not a man, who is invisible. We worship an entity which we were commanded to worship from the 10 Commandments. And you're pointing fingers at us and saying, oh, you're the pagan idol worshiper. Meanwhile, you worship a pagan emperor, that of the flesh. You worship a man, and you call it the Jewish God. You're sick. Do you know what I mean? This is the sickness of the Christian. This is Christianity's country under the Catholic Church, under the pitiful state. You will never be as elite culture, as moral as the Jews. That's true. You have hundreds of thousands of rapists, cannibals, and psychopaths who cut off heads, arms, legs. Jesus Christ hasn't helped you enough. The King James Bible is based on the Torah and made English the standard of the civilized world, not Hebrew or Latin. The King James Bible was written, what, in English? So, how it's not connected at all with the Tanakh, because the Tanakh was written in Hebrew. So, in ancient Hebrew, it's written in the Hebrew of back in the Holy Temple, what we call the Holy Tongue, right? So, the King James Bible has no connection with the Holy Tongue, right? You Jews are still speaking English and living your best life in Protestant America. America was based off of the Ten Commandments, so it can be argued that it was based off of the Jewish law. So you can't really claim America to be yours when literally it's based off of the Ten Commandments, which is found on the wall by the White House. So that's rich, isn't it? Isn't it rich? You know? Isn't it rich, the Christians stealing Jewish tradition, right? But at the same time, they are transgressing the Jewish tradition by worshiping a man as a god. But then accusing Jews of living off the fat of the land of the non-Jew who stole our culture, that which they themselves get rich off of. Isn't that rich coming from the non-Jew, the Christian, right? There are countless images of the murders of hundreds of women in Mexico and Brazil. You have a nauseating hellish culture. Exactly. Moses prophesied he would use a foolish nation to provoke you to jealousy. The only jealous person I see here is you, because Jewish people, our star is rising, and if you go and look at the video that I made the other day about this guy called, what was his name? His name was, I made a video about this guy named Connor Tomlinson. He blames the Jews for British problems. If you go and watch his video on his channel, you will see how jealous he is of Israel and the Jewish nation. And because he sees Europe going down, and he's jealous of us. And so it can be argued that you're jealous of the Jews, because why else would the non-Jews treat the Jews so badly? That's the question. Do you know what I mean? Like, why else would the non-Jews march with terrorists and against the Jews? Why? Netanyahu was not born. Even if he was born in America, so what? I was also born in America. My father's Russian. My mother's South African. What does one have to do with the other? Right? 10 Yahoo. See, where was he birthed? He was born in October 1949. He's an Israeli, a politician and diplomat who served as prime minister. He was born in Tel Aviv. Why are you lying, sir? Everybody, let's expose this guy as a liar. This is why I say you can't trust a Christian, because even though they pretend to be our friend and they support Israel, they will lie to your face. Now let's go and see what this guy said. He said, A. Hammer says, reality check, even Netanyahu was born in America. Let's go and check here. Benjamin Netanyahu, according to the Wikipedia, was born October 21, 1949. Born in Tel Aviv and raised in West Jerusalem in the United States. He lived in the United States for a time. He was raised in the United States for a few years. He returned to Israel in 1967. He was born in Tel Aviv. Why do you lie, sir? right? So he was born and raised in Jerusalem, moved to the United States for a few years, and then returned in 1967 to join the IDF. So even though Wikipedia is not lying on this, but somehow you feel the need to lie, sir, that's low. Sir, that is very low. I'm embarrassed and ashamed for you. And this is why, my friends, you cannot trust a Christian, because they lie. It's part of their culture. You know, that's why Islam and Christianity are so similar. They should kiss and make up, right? God said don't lie in the 10 Commandments, and you just broke the 10 Commandments. But am I surprised? I'm not surprised that you broke the 10 Commandments, because you already did break the 10 Commandments by worshiping a man as a god, which is against the 10 Commandments, right? Where it says you should not worship any image or form or anything in the likeness of a man or a woman, that which is in the heavens above or the earth below, and you worship a man literally. So how many times do I have to repeat it? It's like you can repeat it until you're blue in the face, but the Christian is so blinded by their own pagan beliefs that they refuse to see what's before them. And they say we are blind, they're blind, right? Most Christians are no different from the ISIS supporting Islamists. The societies you represent are mediocre, and they would not allow a woman to sustain her existence. Exactly. And you know what's the most interesting I was watching today, which got me really depressed? There are these people on YouTube, women, who debunk what they call the red pill movement, right? So there are a bunch of men who run around and they put down women, and they use their whole platforms to degrade women. And, right? One of them is a man called, one of them is a man who likes to degrade women as well, and he claims himself to be a Christian. And they run around and they put women down. So there are people who actually debunk these people, and they make fun of these Christians, right? Even though I don't agree with all that they say, because a lot of these people who debunk the red pill Christian manosphere, they call it, they could be anti-Semitic too. But it's just really funny to watch, and it's a great demonstration on the hypocrisy of Christianity and the Christian people, right? The 10 Commandments are not a Jewish tradition, they are God's law. Who brought the 10 Commandments to the world? Who brought the 10 Commandments to the world, my friend? Right? Who brought the 10 Commandments to the world? Like, what a bizarre thing to say. Do you know what I mean? Who was the 10 Commandments given to? First of all, the 10 Commandments are not for you. You only have 7 commandments. The 10 Commandments are for the Jews. You are supposed to keep 7 of those commandments, not 10. You're not supposed to keep the Sabbath, and you don't need to honor your parents. And one other thing, you don't have to... You're allowed to lie, actually, I think, according to... You don't need to... Is it a lie? You're not allowed to bear false witness. America's the only nation where every Jew and woman have a right to own a gun. Is the only nation where everyone can own a gun. What does that have to do with Jews? Do you know what I mean? What does that have to do with Jews? I'm ex-Muslim. If you can persuade me, how are you going to persuade a Jew? The Bill of Rights is based on the Ten Commandments interpretation to the New Testament. The Christians of America were influenced by Kabbalah. Right? That's what we read the other day in the... where the Kabbalah comes from, right? Okay, I was wrong about where Netanyahu was born, but he went to school in America. You lied, sir. You weren't just wrong, you lied. And you used that lie to try to prop up your position of somehow Netanyahu not being what? I don't know what your point was, you know? That somehow, oh, we're jealous because... And, oh, America gave Netanyahu his education, so therefore he is what he is today because of you? Dude, get a grip. Humble yourself. What is this? The most dangerous places to be a woman. I don't want to see that. This is Christianity. I made a mistake. Hundreds of thousands. Yeah, convenient mistakes, right? Hundreds of thousands of porn sites belong to Christians, and every year thousands of women die from drugs and are raped. You worship the Messiah of nonsense. I'm not going to convince you because you are a Christian, you know? Prostitute interviewed. Chayana, a summary of your trashy Christian culture. It's really sad. 16-year-old girl living in the streets. That's very tragic. Where women and rights have the rights to own a gun. America's the only nation, A. Hammer says, where women and Jews have the right to own a gun. Why? What does that say about the Christian culture altogether? You know, women being liberated and having inheritance rights and having the rights to work and having the rights to own land and women being free to vote is a Jewish concept. You got that from us. You got that from the Jewish culture and the Jewish tradition. And you should thank the Jews for that. We don't have to thank you for that. The fact that you adopted our culture, right? And also, right, the rest of Europe doesn't have much. The rest of Europe, which is Christian, has nothing to say for themselves, right? And the rest of the culture, which Juarez brings up, you know, like the people of Argentina, the people of all these, Mexico, which is Christian, their culture is not a safe one for women, right? And Christians in general like to put women down. And why is it that Christians like to put women down, like in the manosphere? For example, if I go and look at, if I go and look at, here, this girl here, Brittany Venti, destroys her cancel culture credibility. No, people don't like her, but Brittany Venti, right? She's a girl who rips apart what we call the manosphere, right? The Christian culture, for example. And she exposes the hypocrisy of the Christian males, especially, and the women, but mostly the men, who want to subjugate the women, right? And why is it that the Christian culture wants to dumb down the woman? Why? Why do they like to humiliate women, right?
Do I have 5 kids by 3 guys? Yes, I do. Do I have 5?
Right. So this lady here, she's married to a man named, she's apostate prophet's friend's husband, and her husband debates other women and other Islam, right? And her husband goes and is a Christian apologist. He puts down women who have been what they call promiscuous, but he himself married a woman that is a slut and a hoe, and she actually cheated on her ex-husband, right? No, he cheated on his ex-husband. She cheated on multiple partners, right? And she has kids from like 5 different men, you know? And it's the hypocrisy. And then they go and they try to dumb down women, right? They treat women like they're a commodity. They treat women like women are some sort of slave. This is Christianity. And here we have somebody on my channel that is promoting Christianity as if somehow Christianity gave women freedoms and rights. Meanwhile, it's not Christianity that gave women freedom and rights, because you see here, the Christians are trying to take away women's rights. They don't like the fact that women can sleep with whoever they want. They don't like the fact that a woman can own homes and vote. Nick Fuentes, who is a Christian, he hates women. He says women shouldn't vote. Right? And they walk around preaching Christian culture and how women need to bow down to the men. And meanwhile, and how women shouldn't be promiscuous, and they make fun of other women. Meanwhile, this guy married a woman who had 5 kids by 3 different men. This is the hypocrisy of Christianity. I think Christianity in and of itself is a grift, you know? And there's a reason why people are exposing these people, and it's because there's so many Christians who honor their book. They just run around grifting and trying to put others down and raise themselves up. And they lie and they cheat. And it's because Christianity permits it. Because of... Why does Christianity permit it? I'll tell you why. Because if you believe in your God, Jesus, if you believe in your demigod, then, you know, you're forgiven for all your sins because he died for your sins. So you can lie, cheat, you can grift, you can steal, you can kill, and you will be forgiven. That's Christianity in a nutshell. And that's why, my friends, Christianity is a false religion. Anyway. Okay, A Hammer. Let's put this to rest once and for all because it's sick what you're doing. And it's making me angry. So, A Hammer says here, my friends, look. A Hammer says here, we adopted your culture and God which you reject. Right? Who's your God? Tell me who your God is. Right? Christian culture is the one who liberated women, you liar. Really? How so? Torah does not allow such behavior either. Right, so, this guy, who do you believe in? You believe in a man, right? You believe in a God who you claim to be Jewish? Yeah? Who's the Jewish God? Tell me. Tell me who's the God that you worship. Tell me. Who's the God you worship? A Hammer. Tell me who's the God you worship. Tell me his name. Tell me what he looks like. And give me the image of this man. I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Okay? In the meantime, I'm going to go and look up how you are 10 Commandments about idols. Idolatry. Not adultery. Idolatry. Idol worship. About idols. Okay? Alright, second commandment. Second commandment. Okay? Here's the second commandments of the 10 commandments. And source. Give me the source. The book of Exodus, the Bible, specifically Exodus 20.4 to 6. Copy. Okay, let's go do this, my friends. Let's do this, my friends, okay? Here. It's very simple, my friend. We're going to make this big, and we're going to expose Christianity for what it is, because it's very simple, but the Christians seem to not understand this. Okay. Catholics treat women like slaves. Christian laws of the Bill of Rights gave women equality. It's not Christian laws. It's American laws based off of the 10 Commandments, which has nothing to do with Christianity. Yeah, Fuentes is a Catholic, not a Christian. Okay, and he thinks that you're not a Christian because you're not a Catholic. Let's be real, okay? Give me your God. Tell me about your God. Go on. Give me your... He doesn't want to give me his God. Tell me about your God, okay? Who's your God? You want to drop a link here so I can show you how you believe in an idol. So, tell me who's your God, what's his name, what he looks like. Drop an image. Drop an image of the God that you worship. Go on. I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Isn't this something special, my friends? He doesn't want to drop the image of his Lord and Savior who died for his sins. He refuses. You know what? I'll help you, Ahammer. I know you're having a hard time, so let's do this, okay? Jesus Christ. Let's go and see the beautiful images that they bow down before. Okay, my friends? Okay? What is this? Man is created in the image of God. Human beings. We are an image, right? I think Ahammer ran away. He's scared. You scared? Come back. Human beings are an image. That's how we know. Man is created in the image of God, okay? Here is an image of Jeebus. Right? What do they have in their church? This is their image and this is their God, my friends. This is the cross. Here's an image. Okay? Here. An image, and he's an image of a man. And man is created in the image of God. That's how we know man is an image. Now, this is what the Christians believe. They believe in a man, and they believe in pictures. They bow down before an image. If they argue that they don't bow down to the image of Jesus, well, they have a cross, which they kneel before, and they bow before the cross. And in their mind, they bow down before a man named Jesus. They bow down to an image. This is a picture, my friend. This is a form. What is a form? Let's go and see. Form. Form meaning. Let's go and see. What's a form? The visible shape or configuration of something. So the form is a visible shape or configuration of something. This looks very much like a configuration of something. It's a form. It's a form meaning it's a shape or configuration of something. Okay? It's a formation. It's something you see. Alright? Now let's go back to the image which they worship. This is the form and the image that they worship. They worship a man of the flesh. Now let's go and see what the Ten Commandments says, shall we? Shall we go and see what the Ten Commandments says? Your God is the Father of all, the one Jesus that Moses taught. No, because that cannot be. Because as you can see, don't change the subject, Hammer. Calm down and let's go and see. Here's a form meaning the visible shape of or configuration of something. A form, color, texture of the tree. An embodiment, a manifestation. A form is a manifestation. Okay? You Christians believe that Jesus is the manifestation of God. Right? Am I saying something wrong? Am I saying something wrong? A Hammer. You believe that Jesus is the manifestation of God. Do you believe that? He is the manifestation of what you call the Father, yeah? Of the God. You pray to him as he is the manifestation of God. Yes or no? Yes or no? A Hammer, you can answer. Don't be ashamed. It's okay. You know what I mean? Tell me about it. Tell me. It sounds like he doesn't want to answer, right? God is a spirit, not man. Can't see him except in the image of his son, Jesus. Is he a manifestation? Is he a manifestation of God or not? Is he a God of the flesh? Did Jesus manifest? Is he a manifestation of God that you believe we believe in? Is he the God that we believe in? Is he a manifestation? Yes or no? You're exhausting me, sir. Just be simple and answer the question. Yes or no? I'm not talking about you. Okay, so you believe that a form is a manifestation, is something that manifests. Jesus was manifested, according to you. He was manifested in the flesh. He's a manifestation of God. And a manifestation is a form, which is forbidden. Okay? A manifestation is a form. It's a shape. It's a texture. It's a configuration. It's a appearance. Okay? Now let's go and see. He's a manifestation, which is a form, which is forbidden in the Ten Commandments. And he is an image. Now let's go and see what the Tanakh says about that. Let's see what the Ten Commandments says about a form and an image. Okay? Let's go. Alright? God spoke all these words to respond. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall not have the gods of others in my presence. You shall not make for yourself a graven image. A graven image. You shall not have for yourself a graven image. Or any likeness. Any likeness. Okay, this picture here is not a graven image. It's not on a rock. But it's in the likeness of a man. So, it says here, you shall not make for yourself a graven image or any likeness which is in the heavens above, which is on the earth below, or which is in the water beneath the earth. That's what it says in the Ten Commandments. Here we have a manifestation, a form, an image. that which is in the likeness of the earth. Man, me. I am on the earth. I am an image. I am a form. I am a manifestation. Now you're going to tell me that we Jews don't know the law? We don't know what and understand what we see before our eyes and what we hear, what our God says? You're going to tell me that we don't understand the simple words of the truth of the Ten Commandments? And you tell me and point fingers at me that I am worshiping an idol when it's forbidden for you to worship a graven image, that in the likeness of anything on this earth. You're not allowed to worship an angel, or anything that looks like an angel, wings, a person, nothing. I have no words, my friends. I have no words to express the disgust I have of the Christians, because for them to deny something so simple and so straightforward and so clear, for them to deny this and then point fingers, you know? This is why Christians are cursed. This is why Christianity is going down, because it stays here in the Tanakh, right? It stays here. You shall not make images of anything that is with me, gods of silver or gods of gold. You shall not make for yourself. In any images. You should not you shall not ascend with the steps upon my altar, so that your nakedness shall be exposed. These are more laws, right? God says, you know, you shall not murder, honor your father and mother. You goyim don't need to do that. And it talks about the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath. Do you want another place where it shows where it states clearly that you're not allowed to worship anything in the likeness of anything on this earth, which you worship? And that's how we know that you are worshiping an idol. Like, is this not clear to you? Are you blind? Are you deaf? And you call the Jews deaf and blind, when literally the Ten Commandments literally states what is adultery, what is idol worship, sorry. Yeah, according to your book of lies, Jesus Christ is your God, whom you worship an idol, which is against the Ten Commandments. And I showed it to you to your face. And you are literally breaking the foundation of the Torah. The foundation of the Torah is the Ten Commandments. The rest is just commentary. And the fact that you admit to worshiping a man of an image of this world, it just goes to show that you're lying to yourself, my friend. You're lying to yourself. It says here, it doesn't need to be an image in a stone. It's anything in the likeness of an image. Okay, you don't need to manipulate. Just see what's before you, my friend. Let's do this again, because the Christian is mentally retarded, it seems. The Christian is literally mentally retarded, because there's a form of retardation there, or it's a spiritual retardation where they can't see what's before them. Let's try this again. You shall not have the gods of others in my presence. You shall not make for yourself a graven image, or any likeness, anything like it. Is that something that is unclear? You shall not make for yourself a graven image, or any likeness, anything like it, which is in the heavens above, which is on the earth below, or which is in the water beneath the earth. I rest my case, my friends. Continue lying to yourself. And that is why Christianity is going down, my friends. It's very hard to argue with the Christian, my friends. And they say that the Jews are blinded. We have the wool over our eyes. Meanwhile, you show them a simple thing in the Ten Commandments, and they start arguing. You guys are Muslims. You don't believe God can have a son. That's the whole basis of the Quran. Blah, blah, blah. Guess what? The Muslims, they understand the idea of an invisible God of the Ten Commandments. Their religion is not idol pagan worship. Your religion is the definition of pagan idolatry, because you worship an image in the likeness of which is on this earth, or in the heavens, or below the water. Okay? It's very simple. Lie to yourself. Keep lying. And it's okay. But at some point, your lies will catch up with you. Christianity is going down, my friends, for the fact that they can't acknowledge they can't acknowledge that they are wrong, you know? You can show it to their face. Show it to their face. What does this mean? Does it mean not what it means? It says, not in the likeness of anything that is on this earth. Any image. We are an image, a form, a manifestation. But the Christian can't understand that because there's spiritual mental retardation there, my friends. Islamic Jewish channel, because you both agree God couldn't have a son. We both agree that God is not a man or an image. And that's where Christianity doesn't see logic, you know? I showed you where it states in the commandments, and you reject it. You reject the truth. And you lie to yourself, and then you start arguing other nonsense. It's very simple. You worship a man of the flesh, which is forbidden in the Ten Commandments. And you think it's funny, and you make fun of Muslims who actually understand what the Ten Commandments says. And it's very simple. It's not rocket science. Do you know what I mean? It's not rocket science. It's just basic logic. It's basic, straightforward. What is idolatry? You worship a man, which is a form and an image. It's a manifestation. You're not allowed to do that if you're following the Ten Commandments. You're not allowed to worship anything that looks like anything on this earth, or anything in the heaven, or anything in the water. You can't worship a fish. You can't worship a rock. You can't worship a mic. You can't worship a man. That's the Ten Commandments. That's the meaning. But the Christian has mental retardation. So we're going to leave it there, my friends. Anyway. And they say Jews have a blockage, you know. The Christian, they can't even acknowledge basic stuff. Basic stuff they can't acknowledge. It's sick. It makes me sick, my friends. Anyway. I'm going to go now. I had enough of this Christian nonsense. This A-hammer. It's like, it's sick in the head. You can't see straight. You can't think straight. It's like you show them in the front of their eyes something and they can't see what the words say, nor can they understand the meaning. So if you can't understand something so simple, then I don't know what kind of human being you are. Anyway, but that's the Christian people. Can you imagine? There's like 2 billion Christians on this earth who believe in the same nonsense as this guy, and when you show them the truth, which is so simple, they still can't get it. They have a mental block. 2 billion people are spiritually mentally retarded, but it's manifesting physically, just like their Lord and Savior, their Lord and Savior manifestation, image, which is forbidden in the Ten Commandments. I rest my case, my friends. It's just too much for me. I can't do it. I can't do it, my friends. I can't do it. I'm done. I can't argue with people